The night air inside the great hall buzzed with anticipation. Candles floated high above, casting a soft glow over hundreds of curious faces. The first years stood nervously in a line, their robes too big and their eyes wide with wonder. Among them were two identical girls, bushy brown hair, sharp brown eyes, and matching freckles dusted across their noses. Yet, even now, small differences set them apart. Hermione Granger stood with her back straight, lips pursed in determination. Beside her, Helene Granger, her twin sister, shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her expression unreadable, but a flicker of amusement danced in her eyes. Where Hermione was tightly wound with excitement and anxiety, Helene exuded a calm confidence that seemed almost out of place. Professor McGonagall called, "Granger, Hermione." Hermione swallowed hard, stepped forward, and sat on the stool. The sorting hat was lowered onto her head, slipping over her ears and down to her brow. "Ah, bright one, aren't you?" came the hat's voice in her mind. "Eager to prove yourself, to learn. A thirst for knowledge. Oh yes, plenty of that." Hermione squeezed the edge of the stool. "Please, Gryffindor," she thought fiercely. "I want to do good, I want to be brave, I want to make a difference." "Well, well," mused the hat. "Plenty of bravery here indeed. Could do well in Ravenclaw, but you have the courage of a lion. Better be Gryffindor." The table in red and gold erupted in applause. Beaming, Hermione removed the hat and hurried over to her new housemates, who greeted her with cheers and claps on the back. "Granger, Helene," came McGonagall's voice again. Helene moved forward, the corners of her mouth twitching in a smirk. As she sat, the sorting hat settled on her head. "Another Granger, and so alike, yet so different," the hat murmured. "Ambitious, aren't you? Clever, yes, but something else, resourceful, cunning. Not afraid of bending a few rules if it means success, Helene grinned inwardly. "I want to be the best. I want to win. Put me where I'll have the power to make my mark." The hat chuckled. "Oh yes, better be Slytherin." This time the table in green and silver roared with approval. Helene lifted the hat, gave a brief nod to McGonagall, and sauntered toward the Slytherin table. As she passed Hermione, their eyes met for a heartbeat. Hermione's filled with confusion, Helene's with an almost wicked glint. The rest of the sorting blurred for Hermione as she kept glancing at the Slytherin table where Helene now sat, already deep in conversation with a dark-haired boy named Draco Malfoy. Her twin, her other half, was separated from her in a way that felt more profound than she'd ever imagined. Later, in Gryffindor Tower, Hermione sat on her bed, staring out the window. The stars seemed impossibly distant tonight. She thought of Helene down in the dungeons, wondered if she missed her, if she felt the same emptiness. Meanwhile, in the Slytherin common room, Helene was wide awake, sitting in an armchair near the fire. Malfoy had gone to bed, but she stayed behind, thinking. This was her chance to be her own person, no longer the other half of the Granger twins. She would carve out her own destiny here, away from Hermione's shadow. The next morning at breakfast, the divide between them became even more apparent. Hermione approached Helene at the Slytherin table, but before she could speak, a sneering voice interrupted. "What do you want, Gryffindor?" Malfoy drawled, smirking. Hermione hesitated. Helene didn't say anything, just watched quietly as if curious what Hermione would do. "I just wanted to say good morning to my sister," Hermione said stiffly. "Sister?" echoed Pansy Parkinson, who sat nearby. "Oh, that's rich. A Gryffindor and a Slytherin. Bet your parents are proud." Helene finally spoke, her tone cool. "Leave it, Pansy." "Hermione, good morning." But the way she said it, formal and distant, made Hermione's heart sink. Days turned into weeks. The sisters rarely spoke except in class, where Helene seemed to take pleasure in challenging Hermione's answers or pointing out flaws in her reasoning. At first, Hermione thought it was harmless rivalry, but soon she realized Helene was deliberately building a wall between them, one brick at a time. In potions, Helene partnered with Malfoy, and together they produced flawless brews, earning Snape's rare praise. Hermione found herself paired with Neville more often than not, struggling to keep up as her attention drifted toward Helene's table, where the two seemed to work as a perfect team. The divide between Gryffindor and Slytherin became their divide. The sisters who had once shared secrets under the covers, who had planned their Hogwarts dreams together, now seemed to stand on opposite sides of an invisible battlefield. But neither of them realized, not yet, that the true test of their bond was yet to come. For beyond the castle walls, in the shadows of the forbidden forest, and the corridors of power in the wizarding world, darker forces stirred. And both Granger twins, no matter how divided they felt now, would soon be caught in the storm. The autumn wind swept through the castle grounds, carrying with it the scent of damp leaves and the promise of colder days. Inside Hogwarts, the tension between Gryffindor and Slytherin houses crackled more fiercely than the fires burning in the common rooms. And at the heart of that rivalry, two sisters moved further apart with each passing day. Hermione clenched her quill so tightly during Charm's class that the feather snapped. Professor Flitwick glanced over in surprise, but Hermione quickly muttered an apology, cheeks burning. Across the room, Helene caught her eye and smirked, not cruelly, but with a glint of amusement that stung more than an outright insult. Later, in the library, Hermione sat with Harry and Ron, buried in a pile of books on magical creatures for their next essay. She tried to focus, but every now and then she caught a glimpse of Helene at a table near the restricted section, surrounded by Slytherins. Blaise Zabini leaned in to say something to her, and Helene laughed, a clear, ringing sound that echoed in Hermione's ears. "I don't get it," Ron muttered, scratching his head as he stared at his parchment. "Why would anyone want a pet niffler? They sound like trouble." Hermione forced herself to look down at her notes. "Because nifflers are used to find treasure. Wizards used to keep them for digging up gold and jewels." "Did you even read the chapter?" Ron scowled. "I tried, but someone kept sighing every 5 seconds. His gaze flicked meaningfully toward Helene's table. "I'm not sighing," Hermione said defensively, though she knew she had been. "And can we please focus?" But it was impossible to focus when it felt like her own twin was becoming a stranger. They passed in corridors like acquaintances, exchanging polite nods at best. At worst, Helene would walk by with Malfoy and his cronies, pretending Hermione wasn't there at all. The tension came to a head one Friday afternoon during their first flying lesson with Madame Hooch. The Gryffindors and Slytherins gathered on the lawn, brooms at their feet, the autumn sun glinting off the handle of each broomstick. "Now, when I blow my whistle, kick off from the ground, hover for a moment, then come back down," Madame Hooch instructed, sharp-eyed as she surveyed the group. Hermione's heart raced. Flying wasn't something she'd ever done before, and despite all her reading, she wasn't sure she'd be good at it. She glanced at Helene, who already looked perfectly at ease, one hand resting casually on her broom. The whistle blew. Brooms shot upward, some gracefully, others with alarming speed. Hermione's broom wobbled, jerked to the side, and carried her a few feet into the air before she overcorrected and crashed down hard on the grass. Above her, Helene soared effortlessly, looping once in the air before descending with a flourish. The Slytherins cheered, and Malfoy clapped her on the back. "Brilliant, Granger. Didn't know mudbloods could fly like that." Helene's grin faltered for a split second, but she didn't correct him. Instead, she looked at Hermione, who was brushing grass from her robes and trying to ignore the burning in her cheeks. Later, in the Gryffindor common room, Hermione paced by the fire while Harry and Ron argued over wizard chess. Her thoughts churned. Helene had always been the more daring twin, more confident, but this was different. Helene was changing, or perhaps, Hermione thought bitterly, she was simply showing who she'd always been. But even as Hermione's anger simmered, a part of her ached for the bond they once shared. Down in the Slytherin common room, Helene sat alone at one of the tables, staring into the green glow of the enchanted lake beyond the windows. The water rippled, shadows of giant squid tentacles drifting past. She thought about Hermione's face that afternoon, the hurt hidden behind forced indifference. Helene hadn't meant for things to go this far. But once the Sorting Hat had called out Slytherin, she'd felt something snap, a chance, at last, to define herself apart from Hermione. And now it felt too late to turn back. The next day, the twins found themselves face to face in the library's dimmest corner, both reaching for the same book on advanced defensive spells. Their fingers brushed. Hermione was the first to speak. "You could have said something. When Malfoy called me that." Helene hesitated. What difference would it have made? He'd have said worse next time. "It would have mattered to me," Hermione said quietly. They stared at each other. For a moment, it seemed as if the distance between them might close. But then footsteps echoed nearby, Malfoy and Zabini approaching. Helene stepped back, her expression closing off. "I don't need to fight your battles, Hermione," she said coolly. "Not anymore." And just like that, the rift widened. What neither twin knew was that their paths were already weaving into something larger. In the weeks ahead, Hogwarts itself would become a stage for secrets, lies, and choices that would test both their hearts. The leaves outside the castle had begun to burn red and gold, carpeting the grounds with the colors of Gryffindor. But for Hermione, autumn brought no comfort. The invisible wall between her and Helene felt thicker by the day. It wasn't just house rivalry anymore. It was like Helene belonged to a world Hermione couldn't understand, or worse, one she didn't want to. It started with whispers. First in the corridors, then in classrooms. A strange chill seemed to follow them. Rumors of something prowling the forbidden forest, of strange howls at night, of shadows seen out of the corner of the eye. Filch muttered about vandals, Peeves blamed the Bloody Baron. But the older students traded stories in hushed voices, of dark creatures stirring, of something watching Hogwarts. Hermione tried to push it from her mind. She had enough to worry about. Helene was no longer just another Slytherin. She was becoming their Slytherin, Draco's friend, Snape's favored student, the girl who could outfly most of the Quidditch team and brew a potion as well as any second year. And Hermione hated how much it hurt. One crisp morning, the Gryffindors and Slytherins filed into defense against the dark arts, where Professor Quirrell awaited them, trembling as usual. His turban seemed more crooked than ever, and he kept glancing nervously at the door. "Tea today," Quirrell stammered. "We shall practice the Aeroductor curse. A useful spell against sea-certain creatures, yes." They paired off. Before Hermione could move toward Harry or Ron, Quirrell assigned partners. Hermione and Theo Knott, a quiet Slytherin boy, Helene and Harry. The irony wasn't lost on either twin. Helene raised an eyebrow at Hermione, as if to say, "Let's see how you like it." The lesson began. Hermione focused on her wand work, determined not to let Helene distract her. Across the room, Helene and Harry faced off. To Harry's surprise, Helene offered no sly comments, no smirks. She simply nodded, wand at the ready. "Reducto." Harry tried first, blasting a practice target into splinters. Helene's turn. She raised her wand with effortless grace. "Reducto." Her target exploded with such precision that even Quirrell stopped shaking for a moment to stare. "Well done, Miss Granger," he said, voice thin. Hermione's heart twisted. Helene caught her gaze just long enough for Hermione to see that glint again, pride, and perhaps a challenge. That night, Hermione couldn't sleep. She stared up at the hangings of her four-poster bed, listening to the wind howl outside. Somewhere deep in the castle, the clock struck midnight. She thought of Helene, wondered if she lay awake too, or if she slept soundly in the Slytherin dungeons, dreaming of triumphs and victories. The next day brought a new shock. At breakfast, owls flooded the hall with letters and parcels, but one owl, a sleek black one, dropped a single envelope onto the Slytherin table. Helene opened it, frowned, and shot a look across the hall toward Hermione. Hermione's heart thudded. Had something happened at home? After breakfast, Helene caught up to her near the greenhouses. "Hermione, wait." Hermione stopped, surprised. They stood in a patch of weak sunlight, the air crisp and cold. "I got a letter from Mum and Dad," Helene said quietly. "They're coming to visit at Christmas. Both of them." Hermione blinked. So, they want us to spend the holiday together. In Hogsmeade. Like we're still, like nothing's changed. Hermione's throat felt tight. Maybe nothing has to change. Helene looked away. "You know it already has." Before Hermione could answer, a loud scream echoed across the grounds. Both girls spun around. Students were pointing toward the edge of the forbidden forest, where Hagrid's hut stood. Smoke rose in thin black spirals. Without thinking, Hermione and Helene ran toward the commotion, their differences forgotten for the moment. Hagrid was out front, stamping out a small fire near his pumpkin patch, his face red with effort. "You shouldn't be out here," he barked at the gathering students. "Nothing to see, just a small accident." But Hermione saw the scorch marks clawed into the ground, the unnatural blackness of them. Helene noticed too. Their eyes met, and for the first time in weeks, they shared the same thought. Something is very wrong here. Back in the castle, as the students buzzed with theories, a rogue dragon, a hex gone wrong, a prank, Hermione cornered Harry and Ron in the common room. "I don't believe it was an accident," she said, voice low. "And I think Helene knows it too." Ron groaned. "Hermione, she's a Slytherin. She's probably in on it." "She's my sister," Hermione snapped. "And we're going to find out what's happening. Together." But as Hermione lay awake again that night, she wondered if Helene felt the same way. Because down in the dungeons, Helene was writing a letter of her own. To someone she hadn't mentioned to Hermione. Someone who had sent her that strange black-inked note that morning. And beyond Hogwarts, in the deeper dark, something was watching. Waiting. The chill of autumn deepened, and with it came a sense of unease that no amount of roaring fires could warm away. Even the castle seemed to sense it. The portraits whispered more often, staircases shifted at odd times, and Filch prowled the halls with a new intensity, muttering about dark business afoot. For the Granger twins, the tension of Hogwarts now mirrored the strain between them. Invisible, but everywhere. Hermione was determined. If something dark was stirring at Hogwarts, she would find out what it was. She threw herself into research, poring over every book she could find in the library, Fantastic Beasts, Hogwarts, a history, curses and counter-curses. But nothing described scorch marks like those near Hagrid's hut. Nothing explained the howling that echoed across the grounds at night. And while Hermione searched for answers in pages, Helene seemed to be seeking them elsewhere. Helene had grown quieter these past few days. She still walked with Malfoy, still earned Snape's favor, but often she'd slip away, down corridors few dared use, into parts of the dungeons even Slytherins avoided. Hermione caught sight of her once near the entrance to the abandoned classroom on the 3rd floor. Helene disappearing inside with a flick of her cloak, eyes sharp and secretive. The distance between them felt impossible now. And yet, when Hermione looked at Helene across the Great Hall, or in class, she didn't see a rival. She saw her sister, lost in a world Hermione couldn't follow. It all came to a head one moonless night. The castle was still, the only sounds the creak of old wood and the soft hoot of an owl beyond the windows. Hermione sat in the common room, the fire burning low, unable to sleep. The questions in her head spun too fast. What had Helene been doing in that empty classroom? Who had sent her that black-inked letter? And what was the connection to the strange happenings on the grounds? Finally, unable to bear it, Hermione grabbed her cloak, tucked her wand into her robes, and crept out. She had to know. The corridors were silent, shadows pooling in the corners. Her footsteps echoed on the flagstone floors as she made her way toward the dungeons. Every instinct told her this was reckless, dangerous even, but the need for truth burned brighter than caution. She reached the stairwell that led down to the Slytherin common room, hesitating for just a moment before slipping deeper into the gloom. The cold air wrapped around her like a warning. And then she heard it, voices low and urgent, coming from behind an old suit of armor at the far end of the corridor. Hermione froze, heart pounding. She edged closer, straining to hear. "He said the mark would be near the forest," came Helene's voice, unmistakably hers, steady and sure. Not on the grounds themselves. And yet it was right outside Hagrid's hut. Another voice answered, one Hermione didn't recognize. A boy older, maybe a 6th year. Then the creature's straying. "We'll have to tell him." Helene hesitated. "Tell him? Or will you tell Snape first?" There was a long pause. The boy's reply was cold. "You know the answer." Hermione's mind raced. Who were they talking about? What mark? What creature? Suddenly, the suit of armor gave a loud clang as Hermione shifted her weight too fast. The voices stopped. "Who's there?" Helene called sharply. Hermione didn't wait to be discovered. She turned and fled, the sound of running feet behind her. She tore through the corridors, not daring to look back, her heart hammering in her chest. She reached the portrait of the fat lady just as Helene's voice echoed down the hall. "Hermione!" Hermione stopped, breathless, turning to see Helene standing at the end of the corridor, her wand in hand, her face pale but set. "What are you doing down here?" Helene demanded, walking closer. "I should ask you the same thing," Hermione shot back, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "Who were you talking to? What creature? What are you involved in?" Helene's expression flickered, hurt, guilt, defiance all at once. "You shouldn't have followed me." "I had to." "You're hiding something," Something dangerous. Helene glanced around, as if the walls themselves might overhear. You don't understand, Hermione. I'm trying to stop something. I'm trying to protect the school. Hermione stared at her. Then tell me. Let me help. But Helene shook her head, backing away. It's not that simple. And before Hermione could say another word, Helene turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Hermione trembling before the fat lady's portrait. Password? The fat lady asked sleepily. Pixie dust, Hermione muttered. Inside, as she crawled into bed, Hermione's thoughts raced. What was Helene trying to stop? And why did she trust some Slytherin sixth year over her own sister? Down in the dungeons, Helene leaned against a cold stone wall, eyes closed, willing her heart to slow. She hadn't wanted Hermione dragged into this. But now, everything was tangled. And soon, she knew, choices would have to be made. Choices that could pit them against each other for real. Outside, the forest shivered in the night wind. And deep within, unseen, something stirred, hungry and waiting. Morning brought no peace. The events of the night haunted Hermione as she moved through her classes, barely hearing Professor McGonagall's sharp instructions or the clatter of cauldrons and potions. She kept glancing at Helene, who seemed as composed as ever, answering Snape's questions with cool precision, jotting notes with a steady hand. It was as if their midnight confrontation hadn't happened. But Hermione knew better. There was a tension beneath Helene's calm, a flicker of something hidden in her eyes when their gazes met. By the time lessons ended, Hermione couldn't bear it any longer. She cornered Harry and Ron in an empty classroom, pacing as she spoke. She's hiding something, I know it. There's something in the forest or near it. And she's involved somehow. Harry looked uneasy. Hermione, she's your sister. Maybe she's trying to help, like she said. Ron frowned. Or maybe she's helping whoever's behind all this. She's a Slytherin, isn't she? You said yourself she's been skulking around with older students. Hermione hesitated, torn. But she wouldn't, not really. Helene isn't like that. She wouldn't choose something dark. Would she? Neither boy answered. Meanwhile, Helene was having a conversation of her own. Deep in the dungeons, away from prying eyes, she stood in a narrow stone corridor, speaking in hushed tones to the older Slytherin who'd met her the night before. Evan Rosier, a name whispered with caution even among Slytherins. You were followed, Evan said, his gray eyes cold and accusing. Your sister could ruin everything. She won't, Helene insisted, though she wasn't certain. Hermione's clever, but she won't understand what we're trying to do. She'd go straight to a teacher. Or worse, Dumbledore. Evan's lip curled. Dumbledore won't stop this. You know that. The creature isn't after students, not yet. It's after the mark. Helene nodded, though unease coiled in her stomach. The mark, some ancient magical symbol near the forest's edge, was a secret even most teachers didn't seem to know about. But the older Slytherins had passed down the story in whispers. The mark was a ward, holding back something that should never wake. And now it was weakening. Helene had thought at first it was just another Slytherin legend. But after what she'd seen, the black scorch marks, the strange patterns on the ground, the shadows in the woods, she knew it was real. Too real. That night, the castle felt heavier, as if the stone walls themselves braced against a coming storm. Hermione lay awake again, the memory of Helene's words. I'm trying to protect the school, turning over and over in her mind. At last, driven by something she didn't fully understand, she rose, dressed, and slipped out of Gryffindor Tower. The corridors were empty, but she moved with caution, wand in hand. This time, she wasn't going to spy. She was going to find Helene and demand the truth. But it wasn't Helene she found first. As she neared the entrance hall, a strange glow caught her eye, a flickering green light coming from outside, beyond the great oak doors. Without thinking, she pushed the door open just enough to slip through, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. And there, near the forest's edge, she saw it, a pattern burning on the ground, green fire tracing lines in the grass, forming a twisted ancient rune. The flames gave no heat but made the air shimmer and hum with power. Hermione gasped, stepping closer. But before she could take another step, a hand grabbed her arm and yanked her back. What are you doing out here? Helene hissed, her eyes wide with fear. She glanced at the rune, then back at Hermione. Are you mad? That thing could have drawn it, or worse, it could be watching right now. Hermione tried to pull free. Helene, stop. Just tell me what's going on. But Helene was already dragging her away, back toward the castle. Behind them, the rune flared brighter for a heartbeat, then died, leaving only scorched grass and a lingering bitter smell. Inside the entrance hall, Helene finally let go. Listen to me, she said, her voice low and urgent. This isn't something you can fix with books or clever spells. There's something in the forest, something old and dangerous. And it's waking up. Hermione stared at her. Then why not tell a teacher? Why sneak around with him? She spat the word. Instead of trusting me? Helene looked away. Because they won't act. And I thought I could stop it before it got this far. And now? Helene's expression hardened. Now I'm not sure anyone can. For the first time, Hermione saw the fear in her twin's eyes. Real fear, not the kind stirred by exams or house points, but the kind that came from knowing the world was teetering on the edge of something terrible. Far beyond the castle walls, deep in the forest, something howled. A sound that chilled the blood and made the night feel endless. And both sisters knew. The storm they feared was closer than either of them had dared believe. The sound of that howl echoed in their bones long after it faded. Hermione and Helene stood frozen in the entrance hall, the heavy oak doors shut tight behind them, the castle's silence now deafening. Hermione's heart pounded so hard she thought it might shake the walls. Helene's hand still gripped her wrist, fingers cold as ice. We can't stay here, Helene whispered at last. Someone will come. Filch or worse. Hermione nodded, and together they moved, feet barely making a sound as they climbed the stairs. They didn't speak again until they reached an empty corridor on the 4th floor, where the moonlight spilled through tall windows and dust danced in the air. Hermione pulled free and rounded on her twin. Helene, enough. You can't keep shutting me out. Tell me everything. Now. Helene looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her properly for the first time in weeks. For a moment she hesitated, then let out a long breath. Fine. You deserve to know. They sat on the cold stone floor, backs to the wall, the castle quiet around them. And for the first time, Helene told Hermione what she knew. It's called the Veil Rune, Helene said quietly. It's not in any of your books, not even in Hogwarts, a history. It's old magic, older than the school. The founders placed it to keep something buried, a creature, or maybe a spirit. The stories don't agree. But the rune keeps it trapped. Or it did. Hermione listened, stunned. And now the rune is failing? Helene nodded. Every time it weakens, the creature grows bolder. The scorch marks, the howling, the strange shadows, they're warnings. The older Slytherins have known about it for generations. It's our house's duty to maintain the rune. At least, that's how they see it. Snape knows. So does Rosier. But no one will go to Dumbledore. They don't trust him. Hermione's mind raced. But that's madness. Dumbledore would help. Helene shook her head fiercely. No. He'd want to study it. Understand it. But by then it might be too late. Evan thinks we can reinforce the rune ourselves, using Slytherin's magic. I thought I could help. I thought I could stop it quietly, without dragging you into it. Hermione stared at her, torn between anger and worry. Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped. We're stronger together. Helene looked away. Because I didn't want to risk you. And because I wanted to prove. I wanted to show I wasn't just Hermione's sister anymore. Hermione's breath caught. The words stung, but they also made her heart ache. All this time, she'd been angry at Helene for pushing her away, never seeing that Helene had felt overshadowed. And now they were caught in something far bigger than either of them. We can't do this alone, Hermione said firmly. You know that. If this thing gets free. Helene cut in. It won't. I won't let it. But you have to promise me something. Hermione frowned. What? Don't tell anyone. Not Harry, not Ron. Not even Dumbledore. If word spreads, it'll cause panic. And the creature feeds on fear. Hermione hesitated. Everything in her wanted to go straight to a teacher. But she saw the desperation in Helene's eyes, the weight her twin was carrying. And she realized, Helene was right about one thing. Panic would make everything worse. All right, Hermione said at last. We do this together. No more secrets. Helene smiled, small but real. Together. They clasped hands, a silent pact in the moonlight. But even as they did, the castle seemed to groan, as if it too felt the burden of what was coming. That night, neither twin slept. Hermione lay awake, planning, thinking of spells, protective charms, anything she could find to help. Helene stayed up too, sketching the rune's pattern from memory, trying to work out where it had failed. And beyond the walls of Hogwarts, in the heart of the Forbidden Forest, something ancient stirred again, closer, hungrier, waiting for its chance to break free. The Granger twins were united at last. But whether their bond would be enough to stop the darkness, neither of them yet knew. The next day dawned gray and heavy, clouds pressing low over the castle, as if the sky itself shared the weight the Granger twins carried. Hermione moved through her classes in a daze, mind not on wand movements or potion ingredients, but on runes and wards and the hungry thing waiting in the forest's depths. Helene was no different. At the Slytherin table during breakfast, she barely touched her food, eyes distant as she mentally traced the Veil rune's pattern again and again. Malfoy tried to bait her with some comment about Gryffindor's latest Quidditch disaster, but Helene didn't even glance his way. That afternoon, the sisters met in secret again, this time in the disused classroom where Helene had been sneaking off before. The room was thick with dust, cobwebs draped across broken desks and cracked windows. But here, they wouldn't be overheard. Helene spread out a piece of parchment on the floor, weighted at the corners with stones. On it, she'd drawn the Veil rune, a complex web of loops and lines, symbols intertwined so tightly that even Hermione, with all her reading, found it dizzying to look at. "This is what's carved into the earth near the forest," Helene explained quietly. "It glows green when the magic stirs. Parts of it are burned out. I think that's where the creature is pushing against the ward." Hermione knelt beside her, studying the drawing. "And this is where we saw the fire last night?" Helene nodded, pointing to a twisted section near the outer edge. "There. The break starts at the perimeter. It's eating inward." Hermione bit her lip. "If it reaches the center." Helene didn't answer. She didn't need to. Together, they worked in whispers, Hermione suggesting charms she'd read about in ancient texts, Helene recalling Slytherin rituals passed down in hushed tones. They debated, argued softly, tested wand movements in the air. The hours passed unnoticed, the castle's usual bustle forgotten. By nightfall, they had a plan, crude, risky, but a plan nonetheless. "We'll need ingredients," Helene said, rolling up the parchment. "Valerian root, crushed onyx, moonflower petals. I can get some from the Slytherin stores." Hermione nodded. "I can raid the herbology greenhouses tonight. Professor Sprout won't notice a few missing moonflowers, not right away." "And the charms?" Helene asked. Hermione hesitated. "I'll have to improvise. The protective magic in books isn't made for repairing ancient runes. But if we combine it with your house's ritual, maybe it'll hold." Neither said aloud what they were both thinking. Maybe it won't. As they left the classroom, the castle seemed to press in on them, the corridors darker than usual, the torches flickering weakly. A cold wind blew through cracks in the stone, carrying with it a faint smell of burned wood. Hermione parted ways with Helene at the top of the dungeon stairs, promising to meet at midnight at the rune site. The hours between felt endless. Hermione sat by the Gryffindor common room fire, pretending to read while her mind raced. Ron noticed, watching her over a game of wizard chess with Harry. "You all right?" he asked, frowning. "You're acting jumpier than usual." Hermione forced a smile. "Just tired. Too much homework." Harry yawned. "Aren't we all?" But as the boys went up to bed, Hermione stayed behind, waiting for the castle to fall silent. When at last it did, she slipped out, cloak around her shoulders, heart pounding. Outside, the night was colder than before, the air sharp and biting. The grounds were eerily quiet, the forbidden forest a dark mass against the horizon. Hermione crept toward the greenhouses first, wand at the ready. The door creaked softly as she slipped inside, the smell of earth and damp leaves filling her nose. She worked quickly, fingers numb as she gathered moonflower petals and a few sprigs of silverwort for good measure. Every sound, the drip of water, the rustle of leaves, set her nerves on edge. But she managed it, tucking the ingredients into a pouch and slipping back out into the night. Helene was already waiting at the rune site, cloaked in black, the onyx and valerian laid out at her feet in precise patterns. The ground beneath them was scarred, the runes' lines dark and broken in places, the grass around it dead and brittle. "Ready?" Helene asked. Hermione swallowed hard. "Ready." Together they began. Helene spoke the Slytherin words, old and strange on her tongue, while Hermione wove protective charms between them, her wand tracing shimmering threads of magic in the air. The moonlight caught the patterns as they worked, casting ghostly shapes across their faces. For a moment, it seemed to be working. The runes' lines glowed faintly, green fire stitching the broken parts together, the air around them humming with power. And then a howl closer than ever before. The ground trembled beneath their feet. From the forest's edge, two burning eyes appeared, watching, waiting. Helene grabbed Hermione's arm. "Keep going. We're almost there." But the creature had found them, and the night was far from over. The howl shattered the night, raw and wild, as if the forest itself were crying out. Hermione's breath hitched as her gaze locked on those two burning eyes at the tree line. They glowed with a terrible light, not red or yellow like an animal's, but a deep, unnatural green that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the broken rune at their feet. "Don't stop," Helene hissed, gripping her wand so tightly her knuckles went white. Her voice was steady, but Hermione could feel the tremor beneath her words. "The rune, we have to finish it." Hermione forced herself to look away from the eyes, to focus on the ancient pattern carved into the ground. Her wand moved again, drawing silver lines through the air, each one weaving into the broken rune's green glow. She chanted under her breath, the protective charm blending with Helene's Slytherin ritual. But the creature was moving. A massive shadow detached itself from the forest, silent despite its size. The grass blackened where it passed, as if its very presence poisoned the earth. Hermione risked a glance and saw only hints of form, a shape too large, too wrong to be anything natural. She caught the glint of claws, the ripple of dark fur or scales, and that terrible, hungry light in its eyes. "It's coming," Hermione whispered. "I know," Helene said through clenched teeth. "We have to hold it off just a little longer." The rune's broken edges were mending. The green fire traced its lines more steadily now, no longer flickering and sputtering, but burning with a stronger light. Helene raised her wand high, voice rising as she spoke the final words of the Slytherin rite. The wind whipped around them, carrying her words into the night. The creature lunged. Hermione barely had time to react. She swung her wand toward it, shouting the strongest shield charm she knew. A shimmering barrier sprang up between them and the monster, just as it struck. The force of the blow sent Hermione sprawling, the shield crackling and groaning under the impact. Helene didn't fall. She stood over her sister, wand aimed at the rune. "It's almost done. Get up." Hermione scrambled to her feet, wand shaking. The creature slammed against the shield again, and cracks spiderwebbed across the magical barrier. The rune flared brighter, filling the clearing with a blinding green light. The hum became a roar, the air trembling with the force of the ancient magic waking in the soil. And then silence. The creature froze, claws inches from the failing shield. The rune's light surged outward in a wave, sweeping across the clearing, over the forest floor, and into the trees. The green glow filled the creature's eyes, and for a heartbeat, Hermione thought she saw confusion, almost pain, in that terrible gaze. With an unearthly shriek, the thing recoiled, stumbling back into the shadows, the burned grass heeling in its wake, as if the land itself rejected it now. The trees swallowed its form, the night growing still once more. Hermione and Helene stood gasping in the quiet, the rune beneath them whole at last, its light fading gently to a steady, protective glow. "We did it," Helene breathed, sinking to her knees. "We actually did it." Hermione collapsed beside her, heart still pounding so hard it hurt. I thought it was going to kill us." Helene laughed, a shaky, breathless sound. "Me too." For a while they simply sat there, side by side, letting the night settle around them. The danger had passed, for now, but the weight of what they'd faced clung to them, a reminder that the forest's secrets weren't so easily banished. At last Hermione spoke. "What was it?" Helene shook her head. "I don't know. None of the old stories ever said. Just that it was sealed away when Hogwarts was built, and the rune keeps it trapped." Hermione shivered. "We have to tell Dumbledore. Or McGonagall. Someone." Helene hesitated, then nodded. Maybe you're right. I don't think it's over." They rose together, brushing dirt and grass from their robes. The castle loomed ahead, its windows warm with candlelight. As they walked back, the bond between them felt stronger than it had in weeks, forged not by house ties, but by the night's shared terror and triumph. But in the forest's heart, far from their sight, the creature watched. The rune had held, but the hunger remained. And the Granger twins' pact had placed them squarely in the path of its ancient, patient wrath. Morning light crept through the castle's high windows, casting long shafts of gold across the stone floors. But for Hermione and Helene, there was no peace in the new day. Their victory at the rune site felt fragile, like ice too thin to stand on. Sleep had been brief and restless, dreams filled with green fire and burning eyes. When they met again at breakfast, they exchanged only a glance that said we're not done yet. Hermione tried to focus on her toast, but the chatter of the Great Hall was a blur. Harry and Ron spoke in low voices about Quidditch tactics, oblivious to her distraction. Across the room, Helene sat stiffly at the Slytherin table, answering Draco's questions with curt nods, barely touching her food. Every so often, she glanced toward the windows, as if expecting to see the creature's eyes watching from the forest's edge. When lessons began, the castle itself seemed to reflect the twins' unease. The staircases shifted more restlessly, doors stuck or swung open of their own accord, and the portraits gossiped in louder whispers. Even Peeves was quieter that day, as if the castle's spirits sensed something brooding beyond the walls. By afternoon, Hermione had made up her mind. Between transfiguration and charms, she pulled Helene aside, steering her into an empty classroom where the sunlight slanted in through cracked panes. "We have to tell Dumbledore," Hermione said, her voice low but firm. "Last night proved it. The rune's holding. But what about next time? What if it breaks again? We can't do this alone, Helene." Helene crossed her arms, jaw tight. "You saw how close we came. You think Dumbledore can do better? That thing's been here longer than he has. Maybe longer than Hogwarts itself. He's not invincible." "I don't think he's invincible," Hermione shot back. "But he's our best chance. We're just students. We don't even know what we're facing." Helene hesitated, torn. "And what if he locks us out of it? What if he sends us back to our dormitories and does nothing?" Hermione softened. "Then at least we'll have tried. We can't keep this secret forever. It's too dangerous." For a long moment, Helene said nothing. Then she sighed. "All right. Tonight. We'll go to him together." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of scarlet and gold, a message arrived at dinner. An owl swept into the hall, dropping a folded scrap of parchment onto the Slytherin table, right in front of Helene. She unfolded it, eyes scanning the brief, hurried scrawl. Her face drained of color. Hermione watched from across the room, heart sinking. She didn't need to ask what the letter said. She saw the fear in Helene's eyes, and the resolve. They met in the corridor outside the hall moments later. Helene shoved the letter into Hermione's hand. "It's Rosier. He's gone into the forest. He thinks he can stop it himself. He's going to reinforce the rune again, alone." Hermione's fingers tightened on the parchment. "He's a fool. He's desperate," Helene said. "We have to stop him. If he fails..." Hermione nodded, already turning toward the doors. "Then let's go." They slipped out under the cover of dusk, cloaks pulled tight against the cold. The grounds stretched quiet and empty before them, the forest a dark silhouette against the darkening sky. As they neared the tree line, the air grew heavy, thick with the scent of earth and moss and something fouler beneath. The sisters moved quickly, following a narrow path through the undergrowth, their wands lit with faint silver light. "Do you see him?" Hermione whispered. "No," Helene said, scanning the shadows. "But he's close. I can feel it." A low growl answered her, not from ahead, but from the side. The sisters froze, turning as one. Between the trees, a shape emerged. Not the massive creature from the night before. This one smaller, but no less terrifying. A beast of matted fur and glinting eyes, its mouth twisted in a snarl, claws digging into the soil. "Wolflynx," Helene breathed. Drawn to the rune's magic. The creature lunged. "Stupefy!" Hermione cried, her spell flashing through the air. The beast staggered but did not fall. Helene's wand slashed through the dark. "Impedimenta!" The wolfling reeled back, slowed by the charm, But another shape joined it, then another. 3 in total, circling now, eyes shining with hunger. Back to back, Helene hissed. The twins moved as one, wands raised, hearts racing. They fought, spells flying, light flashing through the trees. The wolflings snarled and snapped, driven back but not defeated. And then, through the chaos, came a voice. Get down! A blast of green light tore through the clearing, sending the creatures fleeing into the night. Evan Rosier stepped into view, wand lowered, face pale and furious. You shouldn't have come, he snapped. You'll ruin everything. Helene stepped forward, breathless. We came to stop you. You'll get yourself killed. Rosier sneered. Better me than the school. Hermione grabbed Helene's arm. This is madness. Please, let's go to Dumbledore. Together. But Rosier was already turning toward the deeper woods, where the rune's glow flickered faintly. You want to help? Then follow me. We finish this tonight. And with that, he vanished into the trees, leaving the sisters with no choice but to follow. Deeper into the forest, and into the jaws of the darkness they'd tried so hard to keep at bay. The forest swallowed them whole. Twisted trees loomed like skeletal hands, their branches clawing at the sky. The last traces of twilight faded behind Hermione and Helene as they followed Rosier into the gloom. The only light their wands' pale glow, and the occasional flicker of the rune's sickly green fire deeper ahead. Hermione's breath came in short, misty bursts, her nerves stretched to breaking. Every crack of a twig underfoot, every rustle of leaves sent shivers up her spine. She kept glancing sideways at Helene, drawing strength from her twins' determined expression. Whatever divided them before felt distant now. They were bound together by the danger that surrounded them. Rosier, slow down. Helene called, her voice sharp with frustration. Charging in won't help. We need a plan. But the older Slytherin barely spared them a glance. His robes billowed as he strode ahead, wand clenched tight, eyes burning with single-minded purpose. You had your chance to stay behind. You want to help? Keep up. Hermione clenched her jaw. He's mad. I know, Helene muttered, quickening her pace. But if we leave him to this alone, he'll only make things worse. They emerged at last into a clearing, the heart of the forest. The rune sprawled across the ground, massive and ancient, carved deep into the soil and stone. Its lines pulsed weakly, the green fire that once guarded Hogwarts now dim and flickering like a dying flame. And around it, the ground was scarred. Claw marks gouged the earth, scorch marks blackened the grass. The air smelled of ash and rot. Rosier stepped to the rune's edge, raising his wand high. By the blood of Slytherin, by the oath of the house, I bind this seal anew. A roar tore through the clearing, louder than before, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. From the treeline burst the creature, vast, terrible, its form shifting in the half-light as if it couldn't decide what it was. Fur, scales, bone, shadow. Its eyes burned with hunger, locked onto Rosier. No! Helene screamed. She threw herself forward, wand flashing. Protego Maxima. A massive shield charm blossomed between Rosier and the monster, just as it struck. The impact shattered the spell in a burst of light, sending Helene staggering back. Hermione was already moving, casting every defensive charm she could remember. Evan! Fall back! You can't do this alone. But Rosier wouldn't listen. He began the ritual again, voice rising over the beast's roar. The rune flared, answering his words, brighter, stronger. But the creature pressed forward, claws raking the earth, teeth bared in a snarl that made the air vibrate. Helene, we can't let him die. Hermione cried, panic and determination battling within her. She grabbed Helene's hand. Together, side by side, the twins raised their wands, voices blending. Ancient Slytherin words from Helene, precise charms from Hermione. Their magic intertwined, silver and green threads weaving over the rune, binding the broken lines, mending the scarred ground. The air crackled, thick with energy. The creature howled in fury, rearing back, struck by the combined force of their spell work. It lunged, desperate to break through, but the rune's light flared brighter, the protective magic pushing it back. Rosier, seeing the tide turn, added his strength to theirs. His voice joined theirs, his wand steady at last. The rune's pattern blazed pure green, no longer sickly, no longer failing. The ground itself seemed to sigh as the ward sealed, the creature thrown back into the shadows beyond, snarling, defeated, for now. And then silence. The clearing glowed faintly, the rune hole again. The monster was gone, banished deeper into the forest's heart, its hunger thwarted by the twins' bond and Rosier's reckless bravery. Rosier lowered his wand, breathing hard. He turned to them, and for the first time, Hermione saw respect in his eyes. "You saved me." "No," Helene said, voice hoarse. "We saved Hogwarts. But this isn't over. It's only a matter of time before it tries again." Hermione nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "Then next time, we do go to Dumbledore. No more secrets." Rosier opened his mouth to argue, but then he stopped. The weight of what they'd faced together had changed him, too. He gave a curt nod. "Next time." As they made their way back through the trees, the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon. The castle's towers rose ahead, a symbol of safety, and of the battles yet to come. And deep in the forest, the creature waited, watching, its rage growing with the dawn. The sun was just peeking over the horizon as the three of them, Hermione, Helene, and Rosier, stumbled out of the forest and onto the dew-soaked grounds. The castle loomed ahead, its windows glinting gold in the dawn light, but the weight of the night clung to them like heavy chains. Every step toward Hogwarts felt harder, as if the forest's shadows tried to drag them back. Hermione glanced at Helene. Her twin's face was pale, streaked with dirt, her robes torn at the sleeve, but her eyes burned with determination. Rosier, too, walked in grim silence, no trace of his usual arrogance left in his exhausted features. "We can't wait," Hermione said at last, breaking the quiet. "We need to tell Dumbledore now." Helene didn't argue this time. "Agreed." Rosier hesitated, then gave a short nod. "Fine. But if he dismisses this, if he tells us to leave it to the teachers, then we'll deal with that when it happens," Hermione interrupted, sharper than she meant to. "But no more doing this alone." They reached the castle doors, just as Professor McGonagall appeared on the front steps, her sharp eyes narrowing the moment she saw them. She took in their disheveled state in one glance. "Miss Granger. Miss Granger. Mr. Rosier. Inside. Now." Her tone left no room for argument. Minutes later, they stood before Dumbledore in his office. The headmaster listened silently, steepling his fingers beneath his chin as they recounted everything. The failing rune, the creature's attacks, their attempts to repair the ward, the night's battle in the clearing. Hermione expected disbelief. She expected questions. But when they finished, Dumbledore simply leaned back in his chair, his blue eyes sad and thoughtful. "I had hoped it would not come to this," he said quietly. Hermione blinked. "You knew." "I suspected," Dumbledore admitted. "There are forces beneath Hogwarts older than the school itself. The founders did not build here by chance. They sealed away things that did not belong in this world. And over centuries, some of those seals have weakened." He looked at the twins. "You did well to restore the rune. Bravely and at great risk. But this is not a burden you should bear alone." Rosier shifted uncomfortably. "Then what will you do, sir?" Dumbledore rose, moving to the window to gaze out over the grounds. "There are magics I can call upon. Old protections, reinforced with the strength of the staff, the wards of the castle, and, perhaps, allies beyond Hogwarts." He turned back to them. "But I will need your help. The bond you share with the rune now, it makes you part of this, whether we wish it or not." Hermione swallowed. "What kind of help?" "You will continue your studies as normal," Dumbledore said with a small smile. "But when the time comes, I may ask you to assist me in strengthening the seal. That creature has tasted freedom. It will not give up easily." Helene stepped forward, her voice steady despite the weariness in her bones. "We'll do whatever it takes." Dumbledore's gaze softened. "I know you will, Miss Granger. Both of you." His eyes flicked to Rosier. "And you as well, Mr. Rosier. I am grateful for your courage." Rosier flushed and used to praise. "Thank you, sir." Dumbledore gestured to the door. "Go. Rest. And remember, you are not alone in this." They left the office in silence, the weight of the headmaster's words settling over them. As they reached the corridor outside, Hermione let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "At least now he knows," she said quietly. Helene nodded, rubbing her eyes. "And we're not the only ones fighting anymore." Rosier hesitated at the staircase. "You two were right. I was wrong to try to handle this myself. He met their eyes. Next time, we fight together. And then he was gone, vanishing down the stairs toward the dungeons. Hermione and Helene stood for a moment longer, the castle waking around them, students beginning to stir, unaware of the night's battle or the danger that still lurked in the forest's heart. As they made their way back to their dormitories, both twins felt it, the fragile peace of dawn, and beneath it, the rumble of storm clouds gathering once more. For this was only the beginning. The castle felt different after their meeting with Dumbledore. Though the halls were filled with the usual chatter of students and the scrape of chairs in classrooms, beneath it all lingered a hum of tension, as if the ancient stones themselves braced for what was coming. Hermione and Helene moved through their day with heavy hearts, aware that while the immediate threat had passed, the true danger still lurked in the forest's depths. Hermione found it impossible to focus. In charms, she mispronounced a spell, causing Ron's quill to sprout feathers. In potions, she spilled powdered hellebore across her notes, smearing the ink beyond saving. Helene fared no better. She snapped at Malfoy when he mocked her distracted air, earning a surprised look from the blonde boy and a snicker from Crabbe. By evening, both sisters found themselves drawn again to the abandoned classroom where they had planned their first defense. The setting sun painted the walls with streaks of red and gold, the air heavy with dust and memory. "We can't just sit and wait," Hermione said, pacing. "Dumbledore says he'll act, but we don't know when. What if the creature finds another weak point in the rune before he's ready?" Helene leaned against the wall, arms folded. "And what do you suggest? March into the forest again? We barely survived last time." "No," Hermione stopped, thinking hard. "But we could learn more. We don't even know what we're fighting. If we knew what it was, what it wants, maybe we could stop it properly. Seal it for good." Helene frowned. "And where do we find that kind of information? The library doesn't exactly have a section on monsters buried beneath Hogwarts." Hermione's eyes lit with a spark of determination. "Not the library. The Founder's records. Dumbledore said they chose this site because of what they sealed here. There must be some trace left, somewhere in the castle. Old notes, hidden chambers, forgotten books." Helene hesitated, then straightened. "You want to search the castle?" "Yes," Hermione said firmly. "Together." Helene gave a crooked smile. "You really are impossible. And you're coming with me." That night, under cover of darkness, they began. They slipped out of their dormitories, meeting beneath the grand staircase, cloaks drawn tight, wands casting the faintest of lights. The castle at night was a maze of shadows and secrets, and the sisters moved with care, avoiding creaky boards and the patrolling gaze of Filch and Mrs. Norris. Their first stop was the restricted section of the library. Hermione's heart pounded as she used a charm to lift the lock from the gate, the click echoing loud in the quiet. Inside, they searched by wand light, pulling ancient volumes from the shelves, scanning faded titles. "Secrets of the Founders," Helene whispered, holding up a heavy tome. "This looks promising." Hermione nodded eagerly. "Take it. Let's find somewhere safe to read." They made their way to an unused tower room, the walls lined with broken furniture and shattered mirrors. There, by flickering wand light, they opened the book, its pages brittle with age, ink faded but still legible. Hours passed as they read, piecing together fragments of the past. The records spoke of a creature bound beneath the earth by the combined magic of the four founders. It had no true name, only a title, the Hollow Hunger. A thing that devoured not flesh, but magic itself, drawn to places of power, feeding until nothing remained. "It was sealed because it could destroy Hogwarts," Helene breathed, horror dawning in her eyes. "It would drain the wards, the castle, the land, leave it barren." Hermione's fingers trembled on the page. "And now it's awake." Suddenly the room chilled. A gust of cold air swept through, snuffing their light. The sisters froze, wands raised. From the doorway came a voice, low and mocking. "What have we here?" Little Gryffindor and Slytherin spies, digging where they shouldn't. Rosier stepped into view, his wand tip glowing faintly. But something was wrong. His face was pale, his eyes strange, shadowed, as if touched by the same hunger that had stirred the creature. "Rosier?" Helene said, stepping forward. "What's wrong?" He smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "You shouldn't have followed me into the forest. You shouldn't have meddled. Now you've seen too much." Hermione's heart leapt to her throat. The shadows seemed to gather at Rosier's back, as if the creature had marked him, claimed him. Helene moved between Rosier and Hermione, her wand steady. "Stay back." But Rosier raised his wand, and the room filled with greenish light, the color of the rune's fire, the color of the creature's eyes. The hollow hunger was no longer just in the forest. It had found its way into the castle, through him. And the true battle was only beginning. The greenish glow from Rosier's wand filled the broken tower room, casting warped shadows on the cracked stone walls. Hermione's skin prickled, her heart racing so loud it drowned out all other sound. That light, unnatural, sickly, the same hue as the faltering rune, seemed to seep into the air itself, heavy and suffocating. "Rosier, stop," Helene said, her voice steady, though Hermione could hear the tightness beneath. "Whatever you think you're doing, that magic, it's not yours. It's the creature's. You're letting it use you." Rosier laughed, but there was no warmth in the sound. His eyes glinted fever-bright. "You don't understand. I had to let it in. That's the only way. If I can draw its power, I can control it. We can bind it for good. End this." Hermione took a step forward, wand raised. "You're wrong. The Founders sealed it because no one can control it. It feeds on magic. The more you let it in, the stronger it gets. It'll consume you." Rosier's grip on his wand tightened. "You think I don't know that? I have to try. The school won't survive another attack. Dumbledore won't act fast enough. But I can. I can end this." The shadows behind him thickened, swirling like smoke. They seemed to pulse with the beat of some unseen heart, hungry and waiting. Hermione's blood ran cold as she realized. The hollow hunger was listening. Watching. And through Rosier, it was closer to breaking free than ever. "Please," Helene said, lowering her wand slightly. "You don't have to do this. We can find another way, together. Don't let it use you." For the briefest instant, something flickered in Rosier's eyes. Doubt. Fear. But then the shadows surged, wrapping around him like tendrils. His face twisted as if in pain, and when he spoke again, his voice was layered, his own voice beneath, but beneath that, a whisper that wasn't human. "It's too late." Hermione acted on instinct. Expelliarmus. Her spell shot through the air, striking true. Rosier's wand flew from his hand, clattering across the floor. The green glow dimmed, and the shadows recoiled, as if burned by the sudden break in connection. Helene lunged, grabbing Rosier's arm. "Fight it. You're stronger than this." Rosier staggered, shaking his head as if trying to clear it. His breathing came fast and shallow. The darkness at his back shrank, drawing into itself, but it didn't vanish. It clung to the corners of the room, watching. Hermione grabbed the book from the floor, stuffing it into her bag. "We have to get out of here. Now, before it regains its hold." Together, the twins half-dragged, half-led Rosier down the spiral stairs, his feet stumbling as he fought the creature's lingering grip. The castle seemed to groan around them, the very stones uneasy. Cold drafts chased them down corridors, and the shadows seemed to flicker with hidden eyes. At last they reached the entrance hall. Rosier collapsed onto the steps, gasping, sweat beading on his forehead. His skin looked too pale, his eyes sunken, but the madness in them had faded, for now. I didn't mean for it to go that far," he whispered. "I thought I could hold it back. I thought." Helene crouched beside him, gripping his hand. "We know. But you can't face it alone, Rosier. None of us can. It's stronger than we imagined." Hermione turned toward the stairs leading to Dumbledore's office, determination hardening her features. "We tell him everything. Everything. There's no time left for secrets or pride." Rosier didn't argue. His strength spent, he simply nodded, shame and fear mingling on his face. As the three of them ascended the stairs to the headmaster's tower, the castle felt darker, heavier, as if the hollow hunger had left its mark not just on Rosier, but on Hogwarts itself. The creature had found a way in, and the next time it reached for them, it might not be through a single student. It might be through the very walls that were meant to protect them. The spiral staircase seemed endless as Hermione, Helene, and Rosier climbed toward Dumbledore's office. With every step, the weight of what had happened pressed heavier on their shoulders. The shadow that had coiled around Rosier, the voice that had echoed beneath his words, the terrible truth that the hollow hunger had found its way inside the castle. When they reached the gargoyle guarding the entrance, Hermione barely managed to gasp out the password. Lemon drop. The stone creature leapt aside, revealing the door, which swung open before they could even knock. Dumbledore stood waiting, his expression grave but calm, as if he had known they would come. "Come in," he said gently. "I was expecting you." They entered the office, the familiar warmth of the room, the whirring silver instruments, the soft rustle of Fawkes shifting on his perch, a stark contrast to the cold fear that gripped them. The door shut behind them with a quiet finality. Rosier collapsed into a chair, pale and trembling. Helene and Hermione remained standing, as if two on edge to rest. Dumbledore regarded them in silence for a moment, then spoke. "Tell me what happened." The words spilled out, Rosier's plan, the corrupted magic, the shadows that had claimed him, the voice that had spoken through him. Dumbledore listened without interruption, his blue eyes thoughtful, his face lined with sorrow. When they finished, the headmaster steepled his fingers. "I feared this might happen. The hunger has grown bolder. It has tasted the magic of the school, and now it reaches for more, not just through the runes that bind it, but through those it can bend to its will." Rosier lowered his head, shame burning on his face. "I thought I could stop it. I thought." Dumbledore raised a hand. "No one can stand against it alone, Evan. You were brave, but misguided. There is no controlling the hollow hunger. It is not a beast that can be tamed. It is a force of destruction, older than Hogwarts, older perhaps than magic itself. The founders could not destroy it. They could only bind it. And now, that binding phrase." Hermione's voice shook, but she forced herself to speak. "What can we do?" Dumbledore rose, moving to the window. The first storm clouds of autumn had gathered, casting the grounds in shadow. "We must act as the founders once did, united. I will summon the staff tonight. And I will reach out beyond these walls. There are old allies who still honor the pacts made when Hogwarts was built." He turned back to them. "But you three are already entwined in this. The hunger knows you. It will seek you out. And you, in turn, must be my eyes and ears within these walls. Watch for its signs. Report to me at once if you sense its presence." Helene stepped forward. "We'll do whatever it takes." Dumbledore inclined his head. "I know. And you will not stand alone." He looked at Rosier. "You are not lost, Evan. But the road back will be hard. The creature touched you, marked you. Its influence may linger. You must fight it with all you have." Rosier nodded slowly, his voice hoarse. "I'll try." Hermione felt a strange mix of fear and hope. For the first time, they had a plan, and help. But the storm gathering outside felt like an omen. The hunger was awake, and it would not wait quietly while they prepared. That night, as the school settled into uneasy sleep, Dumbledore's office remained lit. From the high windows, Hermione watched as owls soared into the storm, bearing messages sealed with the Hogwarts crest. Messages calling allies from beyond the castle's borders. In the shadows of the Forbidden Forest, the creature stirred, eyes burning bright. The battle for Hogwarts had truly begun. Rain lashed against the castle windows, wind howling through the towers as the autumn storm swept over Hogwarts. The storm's fury seemed almost a reflection of the turmoil within the castle's ancient walls. Hermione lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling of the Gryffindor girls' dormitory, the drumming of the rain matching the racing of her thoughts. She could still hear Dumbledore's voice, heavy with the weight of history. "The hunger knows you now." Across the castle, in the Slytherin dungeons, Helene sat on the edge of her bed, robe thrown over her nightdress, wand clutched in her hand. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed deeper tonight, shifting with each flicker of lightning. The other girls in her dormitory slept, unaware of the storm outside or the storm that brewed beneath the castle. Neither twin found rest that night. When dawn came, gray and cold, they were already moving. They met in the entrance hall, cloaks drawn tight, eyes hollow from sleeplessness. "Dumbledore said to watch for signs," Hermione said quietly. "I can't just sit and wait." "Nor can I," Helene agreed. "Let's check the grounds. If it's trying to breach the wards again, we might be able to see it." They slipped out into the storm's dying breath, boots crunching on wet gravel as they crossed the courtyard. The Forbidden Forest loomed, dark and silent after the night's tempest. The air smelled of wet earth and moss, fresh and sharp, but beneath it was a taint, that faint trace of rot they had come to associate with the hollow hunger. The twins moved toward the edge of the forest, wands drawn, senses alert. The rune glade lay ahead, the ground there still scarred from the battles of nights past. As they approached, the hair on Hermione's arms prickled. The rune's lines were visible even from a distance, glowing faintly in the dawn light. But something was wrong. "Look," Helene whispered, pointing. Where the rune had once been whole, cracks had spiderwebbed through its lines, as if the storm had fractured the ancient magic. And at its heart, the earth was blackened, the grass shriveled to ash. The protective fire that had once burned there was almost extinguished, its glow a pale shadow of what it had been. Hermione's heart sank. "It's weakening again. Faster this time." Helene knelt, touching the cold, cracked soil. "It's learning. It's testing the ward in new ways." A rustling from the trees made them both leap to their feet, wands raised. But it was no creature that emerged. It was Hagrid, his beard and hair dripping with rain, crossbow slung over his shoulder. "Granger twins," he called, worry creasing his broad face. "What are ya doing out here? It's dangerous, this close to the forest." Hermione and Helene exchanged a glance. Then Hermione stepped forward. "We're helping Dumbledore, Hagrid. The creature, the hunger, it's trying again. Look at the rune." Hagrid's eyes followed her gesture. He let out a low whistle, face darkening. "I told Dumbledore last night, felt something moving out there in the storm. The forest creatures are spooked. Even Fong wouldn't come near the trees. We need to warn him," Helene said urgently. "It's happening faster than we thought." "I'll take ya back myself," Hagrid said firmly. "No sense lettin' ya face this alone." Together, they hurried back toward the castle. But as they neared the gates, Hermione stopped short, eyes widening. On the stone arch above the entrance, lines of green fire flickered. Not part of the wards, but something newer, cruder. A message burned into the stone in a script neither of them recognized, but whose meaning was clear all the same. "We hunger still." Helene's voice was a whisper. "It's not just trying to break free. It's taunting us." Hermione felt the chill of the wind cut through her cloak. "It's inside the walls now. No more waiting. No more watching. We act. Today." Hagrid's jaw tightened. "Aye. Let's get to Dumbledore. Fast." They raced for the castle, the storm's last winds at their backs, knowing the fragile peace had shattered. The hollow hunger was no longer content to wait in the dark. It had declared its intent. The next move was theirs, or the creature's. The great doors of Hogwarts slammed shut behind them, the echo ringing through the entrance hall like a warning bell. Rainwater dripped from Hagrid's coat, pooling on the stones, as he led Hermione and Helene at a brisk pace toward Dumbledore's office. The message burned into the arch above the gate haunted them with every step. "We hunger still." They reached the gargoyle. The password was unnecessary this time. The statue leapt aside as if the castle itself understood the urgency. The spiral staircase rose before them, and they hurried up without pause. Inside, the office was a storm of activity. Professors McGonagall, Flitwick, Sprout, and Snape stood in a circle, voices low and grave. Fawkes watched from his perch, feathers ruffled, his keen gaze following the newcomers. On the desk lay ancient scrolls and open tomes, magical diagrams drawn in silver ink, and a map of Hogwarts where faint points of green fire pulsed at various locations, the rune sites. Dumbledore looked up as they entered. His eyes, usually filled with quiet warmth, were shadowed now with concern. "You saw it." Hermione nodded. "The rune's failing. There's new damage, deeper than before. And the creature, it left us a message." Helene's voice was tight. "It's taunting us, Headmaster. It wants us to know it's coming." Dumbledore exchanged a glance with McGonagall. "So it begins in earnest." He gestured for them to approach. "You should hear what we have learned. Your courage has earned you a place in these councils." Snape scowled but said nothing, his dark eyes unreadable. McGonagall gave the twins a brief nod of respect. Flitwick spoke, his voice unusually serious. "There are other runes, wards we didn't know about, hidden beneath the castle itself. The Founders layered protections deeper than we imagined. But some of these have gone unnoticed for centuries. Weak points." Sprout added, "The creatures learned where to press. It's clever, more than we gave it credit for." Dumbledore pointed to the map. The green lights showed the rune sites, but two of them flickered weakly, barely visible. "Those are where the hunger's touch is strongest." If they fall, the others may not hold. Hermione stared at the map, mind racing. Then we need to reinforce them, quickly. And that is what we shall do, Dumbledore said. But this cannot be done by magic alone. The Founders combined spells with blood oaths, tokens of power, and pacts with magical creatures who shared in guarding the school. We must awaken those bonds again. Helene stepped forward. You mean the centaurs? The merfolk? The giants? Indeed, Dumbledore said. And others even older. I have sent word. Some will come. Some may refuse. We must be ready for either. At that moment, the door opened and Professor Sinistra entered, rain dripping from her cloak. She carried a soaked parchment in one hand. Headmaster, a reply. The centaurs will meet with you at dusk. But they warn, the forest is restless. They say the hunger has stirred beasts long thought lost. Dumbledore took the message, nodding. Thank you, Aurora. That will have to do. Hermione felt the weight of it settle deeper. The centaurs, proud and wary, rarely offered aid, and even they feared what the hunger had roused. We want to help, Helene said, her voice clear and resolute. Not just watch. Let us go to one of the ruined sites. We can strengthen it. Together. Snape spoke at last, his voice soft but cold. You would risk exposing them further, Albus? They're children. But Dumbledore's reply was firm. They are already part of this, Severus. The hunger chose them. It is not a matter of permission anymore. It is their fight as it is ours. Hermione met Snape's gaze, unflinching. We're ready. Snape studied them a moment longer, then gave a small, grudging nod. By nightfall, Hermione and Helene found themselves standing again at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, this time with Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Hagrid at their sides. The centaurs waited beyond, their eyes bright in the gloom. The air was thick with tension, the storm clouds slow to leave, as if the sky itself waited to see what would come. And deep in the earth, beneath stone and soil, the hollow hunger listened. The runes might yet hold for a night longer, but the battle for Hogwarts had truly begun. Night fell thick and heavy over Hogwarts, the last shreds of storm clouds breaking apart to reveal a sky studded with cold, sharp stars. The grounds lay hushed, as if the castle itself held its breath. Hermione, Helene, and the small group of staff crossed the sodden grass toward the edge of the forest, the wet earth soft beneath their boots. Ahead, the centaurs waited. A dozen of them stood in a loose semicircle where the trees met the meadow, their tall forms silhouetted against the starlight. Their bows were slung across their backs, but their hands rested close to them, watchful, wary. Firenze stepped forward, his pale coat gleaming silver in the moonlight, eyes full of quiet wisdom and worry. Albus Dumbledore, he said, voice carrying through the night. You have called. We have come, though the stars give ill signs for such a meeting. Dumbledore inclined his head with deep respect. Firenze, friends of the forest, I ask your counsel and your aid. The creature beneath this ground, the hollow hunger, stirs. It has already tested our wards, corrupted our magic, and reached into the hearts of students. Soon it will break free unless we act together, as our ancestors once did. A murmur passed through the centaurs. One, darker-coated and grim, spoke sharply. You would ask us to bind ourselves to the fates of humans again? Your wars, your walls, why should we? Hermione felt a flare of frustration but bit it back. It was Helene who stepped forward, her voice steady, cutting through the night. Because if Hogwarts falls, the forest falls. The hunger won't stop at the castle. It will drain every scrap of magic from this land, yours as well as ours. You know this. You've seen it in the stars. The dark centaur snorted but fell silent. Firenze gave Helene a long look, then nodded. She speaks true. The signs tell of great emptiness, a hollow that spreads. The hunger does not care for walls, nor who built them. Dumbledore lifted his hands, palms open. We seek to renew the pact. We do not ask for servitude, nor for blind loyalty. Only that, as before, we stand together against what would unmake all we hold dear. The centaurs conferred in low voices, hooves shifting restlessly on the damp ground. At last, Firenze turned back. We will aid you, as we did in ages past. But understand this, the hunger's reach grows. You must act swiftly. A ripple of relief passed through the group. Dumbledore bowed his head. We are grateful. Tomorrow, we will begin strengthening the deep wards. Your knowledge of the land will guide us. As the centaurs melted back into the trees, Dumbledore turned to the twins. His expression, though weary, carried a spark of hope. That was well spoken, Miss Granger. His eyes flicked to both of them. Both of you. You reminded them of the truth that binds us all. Helene gave a small, tired smile. It wasn't hard. They know as well as we do what's at stake. McGonagall stepped forward, cloak tight against the night air. What of the other packs, Albus? Will the merfolk answer? The giants. I believe they will, Dumbledore said quietly. Or enough of them. And if not, then we do what we must without them. Hagrid, who had stood silent all this time, cleared his throat. I'll go to the giants myself, if need be. Some still remember me, Mum. They might listen. Dumbledore nodded. That may come to pass, old friend. As they turned back toward the castle, Hermione felt a strange mix of dread and resolve. They had allies now, but the creature beneath the earth was not idle. Every hour it waited, it learned and grew stronger. That night, as she and Helene stood at the high window of Gryffindor Tower, they saw it, faint but unmistakable. Far out on the grounds, near the ruined glade, green fire smoldered in the grass, as if the hunger marked its next move. And in the silence between heartbeats, they could almost hear it calling. Morning came pale and cold, the sun rising behind a veil of mist that clung to the grounds. From the towers of Hogwarts, the castle looked peaceful, but Hermione and Helene knew better. Beneath that quiet facade, danger stirred. The green fire they had seen the night before haunted Hermione's thoughts as she hurried down the staircase to meet Helene. They had agreed to skip breakfast, their hunger forgotten in the face of more pressing matters. Today they would act. Today they would help Dumbledore reinforce the wards. The great hall was alive with the usual chatter of students, blissfully unaware of the growing threat. As the twins slipped out a side door, they passed by Rosier, who leaned against the wall, watching them with hollow eyes. His face was drawn, his skin pale beneath dark hair. But something in his gaze had changed, no longer just guilt or fear. Determination. I'm coming, he said simply, falling into step beside them. Hermione hesitated, but Helene gave a small nod. We could use the help. Together, they made their way toward the grounds, where Dumbledore and the staff were already gathering near the ruined glade. McGonagall stood at Dumbledore's side, her wand drawn, eyes sharp. Sprout and Flitwick prepared the charms that would strengthen the rune's lines, while Hagrid spoke quietly with a centaur at the edge of the trees. The centaur's silver mane glistened in the morning light, Firenze ever watchful. Dumbledore turned as they approached. Ah, our young guardians. I'm glad you've come. Hermione's heart pounded as she took in the scene. The rune beneath their feet glowed faintly, but cracks spiderwebbed through it, some blackened at the edges as if burned from within. The green fire smoldered along those breaks, the hunger's corruption spreading. What can we do? She asked, gripping her wand tight. Dumbledore gestured to the broken lines. You, Helene, and Rosier will aid Professor Flitwick and Professor Sprout in repairing the physical ward, cleansing it, sealing the cracks. Your spells will reinforce the structure of the rune itself. I will work with the centaurs to weave the ancient protections once more. Helene stepped forward without hesitation. We're ready. As the work began, the twins and Rosier moved in careful arcs around the rune, their wands glowing with silver, green, and gold light. Together they chanted the charms Flitwick had taught them. Fixa runium, purgo malitia, vincitio aeternum. Bit by bit, the cracks began to close, the green corruption fading beneath the onslaught of their combined magic. But as the rune mended, the ground beneath them trembled, faint at first, then stronger, as if something deep below stirred in anger. The air grew cold, the light dimmed, and the smoldering fire of the rune flared suddenly, violently, throwing them back. Hermione hit the ground hard, wind knocked from her lungs. She scrambled to her feet, heart racing, as the earth split at the rune's center. A deep fissure opened, and from it rose a voice, not truly. A whisper that echoed inside her head, inside all their heads. You cannot bind what was never meant to be bound. You cannot seal what is no form. I will feed. I will consume. Helene clutched her head, eyes wide with terror. Rosier staggered, fighting to stay upright, sweat beading on his brow. Dumbledore's voice rang out over the terrible whisper, clear and strong. Stand firm. Do not listen to it. Focus your will. It is fear that gives it power. Hermione gritted her teeth, forcing herself to block out the hunger's voice, focusing instead on the rune beneath her feet, on the lines they were repairing, on the threads of magic she could still feel connecting her, Helene, Rosier, and the staff. Together, they poured their strength into the seal. The fissure shuddered. The voice rose in fury, a storm of sound that seemed to shake the sky itself. But inch by inch, the crack closed, the green fire guttered and died, and at last silence fell. The rune was whole again, fragile but holding. Hermione's legs nearly gave out. She braced herself on Helene's shoulder, breathing hard. Rosier sank to his knees, drained. "It's not beaten," he gasped. "Just waiting." Dumbledore placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, Evan. But we have bought ourselves time. And time is what we need." The centaurs faded into the forest once more, silent and grim. The professors began gathering their things, but their faces were set. They all knew this was far from over. Hermione looked out at the forest, the morning sun now climbing higher, burning away the last of the mist. Somewhere beneath their feet, the hollow hunger waited, watching, learning. And they would be ready for it. The sun had climbed higher, casting a pale gold over the grounds, but no warmth reached Hermione, Helene, or Rosier as they stood at the edge of the rune glade, staring at the ground that had so nearly split open completely. The crack was sealed for now, but the memory of the hollow hunger's voice clung to them, cold and poisonous, as if it still echoed in the spaces between heartbeats. Dumbledore dismissed the staff with quiet instructions to rest and regroup, but he motioned for the twins and Rosier to remain. His expression was weary, lined with worry, but his eyes still burned with purpose. "You have all shown great courage," he said softly. "But we cannot simply repair the rune again and again. We must find the root of this, the place where the hunger was first bound, the deepest seal. If we can strengthen that, perhaps we can stop it for good." Helene straightened. "Where is it, Professor?" "That is the trouble," Dumbledore admitted. "The Founder's records speak of it only in riddles. A chamber beneath the school, deeper than the dungeons, older than the castle itself." He looked to Hermione. "You've read the texts you took from the restricted section. Do they say more?" Hermione's brow furrowed as she recalled the ancient book's brittle pages. There was a passage, something about the Foundation Hollow, the place where stone met earth and magic's price was paid. It said the seal was set where no window could reach, no star could see. Rosier let out a slow breath. "So, the very bottom of the castle." "Precisely," Dumbledore said. "There are passages even I have not walked. But we must find the way. And I believe the castle itself will guide us if we ask." Helene tilted her head. "The castle?" Dumbledore smiled faintly. "Hogwarts is more than stone and spell, Miss Granger. It knows its defenders. It will not abandon us now." Without another word, he led them back inside. The castle seemed different as they entered, quieter, heavier. The portraits along the walls watched them pass, their painted eyes filled with concern. Even the suits of armor seemed to shift uneasily, as if sensing the disturbance beneath the stones. Dumbledore paused at a blank stretch of wall near the base of the main staircase, where the air felt cooler, older. He raised his wand, and in a voice low but clear, spoke words none of them understood. Words in a language that felt like earth and shadow, like memory itself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding sound that echoed through the hall, the stones before them parted, revealing a narrow stair spiraling down into darkness. "This," Dumbledore said, "is where we begin." They descended into the depths, their wand light barely piercing the gloom. The air grew colder with each step, damp and heavy, filled with the scent of earth and age. The walls here were rough stone, untouched by builders' tools, as if the castle had grown down into the rock rather than being carved from it. The stairs ended at a great arch of black stone, marked with the same ancient symbols as the rune glade above. Beyond it lay a vast chamber, so large their light could not reach the far walls. The ground was uneven, the ceiling lost in shadow. And at its center, a second rune, larger, older, its lines worn but still faintly glowing with a deep, steady silver light. "This is it," Dumbledore murmured. "The Foundation seal. The heart of the wards." Hermione stepped forward, heart pounding. The magic here was different, older than anything she'd felt before. It thrummed beneath her feet, slow and powerful, like the heartbeat of the land itself. But as they drew nearer, Rosier pointed to the rune's edge. Look, even here, cracks had begun to form. Faint, but spreading, as if the hunger's touch had reached even this far. Dumbledore's face was grave. Then we have no time. We must find a way to mend it. And we must do so before the hunger breaks it entirely. As they stood there, deep beneath Hogwarts, Hermione felt the weight of history and danger pressing close. They had found the seal, but what they would do next and whether it would be enough remained to be seen. The air in the foundation chamber was thick with age, the weight of centuries pressing in from every side. Hermione felt it in her chest, the ancient magic that hummed beneath the stone, steady and slow like a giant's slumbering breath. The silver lines of the great rune pulsed faintly at her feet, but where cracks had formed, that light flickered as if the magic itself wavered. Dumbledore moved slowly around the rune's edge, his wand outstretched, murmuring incantations in a language none of them knew. The silver glow brightened under his wand's tip, but only briefly, and always the cracks remained stubborn and jagged. "It's worse than I feared," he said at last, straightening. His face was pale in the wand light. "The hunger has reached even here. The foundation seal is failing." Rosier stood at the rune's far side, arms crossed tight. His voice was hollow. "If this falls, there's nothing left, is there? Nothing to hold it back." "No," Dumbledore said softly. "If this falls, Hogwarts itself will become the creature's feast." Hermione's mind raced. The Founders bound it here. There must be a way to renew the binding, or strengthen it. Helene nodded. "There has to be. They wouldn't have left this chamber otherwise." Dumbledore's gaze softened as he looked at the twins. "Clever, both of you. There is a way, but it is dangerous and costly." He gestured toward the seal. The Founders did not simply carve a rune and set a spell. They wove their magic into it, blood, will, power. A part of themselves was given to bind the hunger. To mend it now will take the same. Hermione felt her stomach twist. "You mean a sacrifice?" Dumbledore nodded. "A sacrifice of magic, willingly given. And not just any magic. Magic that comes from courage, ambition, wisdom, and loyalty combined. The same forces that built Hogwarts." For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Helene drew a breath. "That's us. Gryffindor and Slytherin. We can give that magic." Hermione hesitated, then met her sister's gaze. "And with Rosier, he's Slytherin too, but there's loyalty in him. And you, Professor. Your magic as well." Dumbledore smiled, though sorrow touched his eyes. "You understand too well for one so young. But yes, together we can do this." They formed a circle around the rune. Dumbledore instructed them in a chant, an ancient invocation of the Founders' binding, words that seemed to hum in their very bones as they spoke. Their wand lights merged, silver threads weaving through the air, linking them to the rune. Hermione felt the pull immediately, the magic drawn from her, not forced but invited. She let it flow, pouring into the seal her courage, her hope, her fierce love for the castle that had become her home. At her side, Helene did the same, her will like iron, sharp with determination. Rosier's magic joined theirs, tinged with regret but also resolve. And from Dumbledore came a deep, steady strength, older, wiser, carrying the weight of a lifetime of guardianship. The silver lines of the rune flared, bright and pure. The cracks began to mend, the hunger's corruption burning away in the light of their combined gift. The chamber seemed to sigh, the weight of the ages shifting as the seal healed, not fully, but enough. Enough to hold. When the light faded, they stood drained but upright, the rune hole once more at their feet. Dumbledore looked at them with quiet pride. "You have done what few could. You have given Hogwarts a fighting chance." Hermione swayed slightly, exhaustion seeping into her bones. "It won't last forever, will it?" "No," Dumbledore admitted. "But it buys us time. And time, my dear children, is what we most desperately need." They left the chamber slowly, the castle's deep magic humming softly around them. Above, the first stars of night began to pierce the darkening sky. And in the earth's depths, the hollow hunger recoiled, but only for now. It had felt the strength of their will, and it would not forget. The walk back from the foundation chamber was long and silent. Each step felt heavier, as if the magic they had given to the seal had drained not only their strength, but something deeper, a piece of themselves left behind beneath the earth. When they finally emerged into the castle's lower corridors, the familiar torchlight seemed strange, distant, as though they were seeing it through a fog. Rosier paused, leaning against the wall, breath ragged. That took more out of me than I thought it would. Helene nodded, wiping her forehead with a trembling hand. It took all of us. But it was worth it. We've done something no one else could. Hermione stared at her sister, heart swelling with pride despite the fatigue. We didn't just buy time. We proved the hunger can be fought, that it can be bound again. Dumbledore, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. His voice was soft but resolute. Indeed, you have done what the Founders once did, and perhaps, in time, you may do even more. But the hunger has learned as we have. It will not be idle while we plan our next move. As if to prove his words, a chill wind swept through the corridor, though no door or window stood open. The torches flickered wildly, shadows stretching along the stone walls. For a heartbeat, they thought it was merely the draft from deep beneath the castle. Then they heard it, the whisper. At first, it seemed like the sighing of the wind. But as it grew, they realized it formed words, fragmented but chillingly clear. You give. I take. You bind. I break. Rosier went pale. It's in the walls. How can it be in the walls? No, Dumbledore said, his eyes narrowing. It is not in the walls, it speaks through them. The hunger's reach has grown. The castle itself feels its presence. Hermione turned slowly, her wand raised, trying to pinpoint the source of the voice. But it came from everywhere and nowhere, as though the stones themselves had been hollowed out to carry its message. Helene's voice was steady despite the dread tightening in her chest. It's trying to frighten us, to make us believe we've failed. And we haven't, Hermione added fiercely. Not yet. Dumbledore led them onward, his wand casting protective wards as they moved through the halls. With each step, the whisper faded, until at last the castle's normal silence returned. But the tension remained thick and heavy. By the time they reached the entrance hall, dawn's first light touched the high windows, casting pale rays across the flagstones. The night had passed, and with it, another battle, but not the war. You will rest today, Dumbledore instructed, though his own face showed the strain of sleeplessness. Your strength will be needed soon. I will send word to our allies, and I will consult the deepest magics I know. There must be something more we can do. Rosier hesitated. And me? What do you want me to do? Dumbledore regarded him for a long moment. You stay close to them. You have earned your place, Evan. And the hunger has marked you. That may yet prove vital. As they parted ways, Hermione and Helene made their way slowly toward Gryffindor Tower, exhaustion finally overtaking their fear. But as they reached the portrait hole, Hermione paused, glancing back down the corridor. Helene noticed. What is it? Hermione shook her head, though the unease remained. For a second, I thought I saw something. A shadow moving where it shouldn't. Helene laid a hand on her arm. The hunger will try to trick us. But we won't let it. Together they entered the common room, leaving the empty corridor behind. But as the portrait swung shut, the shadows at the far end of the hall seemed to shift, watching, waiting. And the hunger whispered again, so faintly it might have been the breath of the wind. You delay. I endure. Hermione awoke after only a few hours' sleep, her dreams haunted by the echo of the hunger's whisper. Even in slumber, its words had curled around her mind like smoke, dark and heavy. She sat up, brushing her hair from her face, heart still racing. Outside, the castle was quiet, but that quiet no longer felt comforting. It felt like the pause before a storm. She found Helene already awake in the common room, seated in an armchair with a book open, but unread on her lap. The Slytherin robes Helene had pulled over her nightdress looked oddly out of place in the Gryffindor space. You couldn't sleep either, Hermione said softly. Helene shook her head, closing the book. I kept thinking about the cracks. How fast they spread. We can't just wait for Dumbledore to find an answer. There has to be something in the records. Something everyone else overlooked. Hermione's mind was already racing ahead. The library. The restricted section, Helene agreed. Properly this time. Together. They dressed and slipped out before the rest of Gryffindor Tower stirred, their wands hidden beneath their cloaks. The corridors were still, the air cold and damp, the castle's silence pressing close. Even Peeves, usually up to mischief at all hours, was nowhere to be seen. The library was locked, of course, but Hermione's whispered Alohomora made quick work of the door. Inside, the scent of old parchment and ink greeted them, strangely soothing despite the tension that knotted their stomachs. The twin pools of wand light danced across rows of towering shelves as they made their way to the restricted section. Once inside, they worked in near silence, pulling down books and scrolls, stacking them on a long table near the back where no prying eyes would see. Dust rose from the pages as they opened volume after volume, searching for clues, for anything that might help them understand the hunger's true nature and how to defeat it. Helene found it first. A brittle scroll, tucked behind thicker tomes as if deliberately hidden. The parchment crackled as she unrolled it, revealing faded runes and lines of cramped script in archaic English. "Hermione," she whispered, voice tight. "Look at this." Hermione leaned over, heart pounding. The scroll spoke of the first binding, the original spell used by the founders to imprison the hunger. But more than that, it described a counterforce, a mythical object said to be hidden deep within the castle, crafted at the same time as the seal. A focus for the binding magic. The text called it the hearthstone. "The hearthstone," Hermione breathed. "That's what's missing. That's what we need to strengthen the seal fully. Without it, we're only patching cracks." Helene's fingers trembled slightly as she traced the faded lines. "It says the stone was hidden where the builder's hands could not reach, nor their eyes behold. Buried in the castle's foundation itself." "But where?" Hermione scanned the scroll again. A diagram, almost invisible beneath the text, showed a symbol they both recognized, the shape of the foundation seal. But beneath it was another mark, a circle within a square, positioned below the rune, at the castle's very root. "It's beneath the foundation seal," Hermione said. "Even deeper than where we went yesterday." Helene straightened, resolve hardening her features. "Then that's where we go next." But before they could plan further, a faint sound made them freeze, the creak of a door. The soft scuff of footsteps. Hermione extinguished her wand light with a whispered spell. The library plunged into gloom, the faint dawn light barely enough to see by. A figure moved among the shelves, slow, deliberate. For a terrible second, Hermione thought it might be the hunger-given form. But then the figure stepped into view. Rosier. His pale face was drawn, but his eyes were clear. "I thought you'd be here," he said quietly. "I couldn't sleep either." Helene exhaled in relief. "We found something. The hearthstone. The key to binding the hunger for good." Rosier moved closer, lowering his voice. "Then we have to find it before the hunger does. And I think I know how we might start." Hermione blinked. "How?" Rosier hesitated, then said, "The Chamber of Secrets. It's the deepest place I know of. If there's a path to this hearthstone, it might start there." Hermione's breath caught. The idea chilled her, but it made sense. "Then we go," Helene said, determination clear in her voice. And with that, the three of them slipped from the library, shadows among shadows, as Hogwarts itself seemed to hold its breath once more. The sun had barely begun to rise as Hermione, Helene, and Rosier slipped through the silent corridors of Hogwarts. Their footfalls echoed faintly, every shadow seeming to stretch toward them as they moved deeper into the castle's underbelly. The plan had formed quickly: reach the Chamber of Secrets, search for signs of the hearthstone, and return before the castle stirred to life. Rosier led them with quiet confidence, his face pale but set. "The entrance is still where it was before," moaning Myrtle's bathroom. "We'll have to be careful. The castle may not approve of what we're about to do." Hermione's mind raced as they moved. The Chamber of Secrets. A place tied to dark magic, hidden truths, and danger. But if it held the path to the hearthstone, they had no choice. They had to risk it. They reached the door to the disused bathroom, its hinges creaking faintly as they slipped inside. The room was as Hermione remembered: cracked mirrors, ancient tiles stained by time and neglect, the air thick with the scent of damp stone. Myrtle's ghost was nowhere to be seen, perhaps still drifting through her melancholy haunts elsewhere. Rosier approached the sink, tracing the small snake etched into its side. He cleared his throat, then spoke in Parseltongue, the harsh, hissing syllables echoing through the empty space. The sink shuddered and slid aside, revealing the dark, gaping mouth of the passage below. A rush of stale, cold air swept upward, carrying with it the scent of earth and decay. "Ready," Rosier asked, glancing at them both. Helene nodded. We don't have a choice. Hermione drew her wand tighter in her grip. Let's go. One by one, they slid into the tunnel, descending into the depths of the castle. The chute was cold and slick, but soon they landed in the familiar stone corridor, the walls lined with the remnants of the great serpents that had once guarded the chamber. They moved cautiously, their wand lights throwing long, uneasy shadows. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the drip of water from the ceiling and the distant sound of their own breaths. At last, they reached the chamber itself. The vast space loomed around them, the giant stone face of Salazar Slytherin watching with empty eyes. The floor was cracked and scarred from past battles, but the air felt thicker now, as if the magic that once permeated the place had begun to stir again. Rosier gestured to the far wall. If there's a deeper path, it might be there, beyond what anyone's found before. Together, they crossed the chamber, their wand lights sweeping over the ancient stones. Hermione noticed strange marks on the floor, runes worn nearly smooth but still faintly visible. She knelt, brushing dust aside. These aren't Slytherin's symbols, she murmured. They're older. Look, this one matches the mark from the scroll. The hearthstone sigil. Helene's eyes lit with recognition. Then we're on the right track. Rosier pressed his palm against the wall near the runes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stones trembled beneath their hands. The section of wall before them slid aside, revealing a narrow, spiraling staircase that plunged deeper into the earth. Hermione's stomach twisted. How far down does this go? Far enough, Rosier said quietly. Far enough that no one was meant to find it again. They began the descent, each step taking them further into darkness. The air grew colder, heavier. The walls seemed to press close, the stairs spiraling tighter the deeper they went. At last, the stairs opened into a small chamber, rough-hewn from the rock itself, the floor uneven, the ceiling low. And at its center stood a pedestal of black stone, upon which rested a gem that pulsed faintly with silver light, the hearthstone. They approached slowly, the power of the object thrumming in the air. Hermione felt it in her bones. Ancient magic, older than Hogwarts, older than the Founders, perhaps older than magic itself. Helene reached out but hesitated. This is it. But before she could touch it, a low, guttural sound rumbled through the chamber. The walls quaked, dust raining down. From the shadows beyond the pedestal, something stirred, the hunger's presence, drawn to the hearthstone's awakening. Rosier's wand snapped up. We're not alone. Hermione's heart raced as she realized the truth. They had found the key. But the hunger had found them. The chamber's air thickened, every breath Hermione took feeling heavier, as if the very magic of the place pressed down upon them. The faint silver glow of the hearthstone pulsed faster, in time with the deep rumble that echoed through the walls. Dust cascaded from the low ceiling, and cracks spiderwebbed across the stone pedestal. Rosier stepped in front of the twins, wand raised, voice low but firm. Whatever's coming, stay behind me. But Hermione and Helene didn't move. They stood their ground, wands gripped tight, as a shape began to emerge from the darkness beyond the hearthstone. It wasn't the hunger, not directly. What crept forward was something else. A guardian. It took the form of a massive serpent, its scales black as obsidian, eyes like twin stars. Not of light, but of void. It moved with slow, sinuous grace, circling the hearthstone protectively, as if it had been waiting for this moment for centuries. Helene drew a sharp breath. A shadow serpent. I've read about them. Created to guard ancient magic. Nearly impossible to defeat. Hermione's mind raced. It's bound to the stone. It won't let us near without proving ourselves. The serpent stopped, reared its great head and spoke. Not in words, but in the language of thought, the voice entering their minds like cold wind. Only those worthy may claim the heart's power. Prove your bond or perish. Rosier swallowed hard. Prove our bond how? The serpent's gaze bore into them, and in their minds they saw flashes. The Founders standing together, their magic united. A reminder that strength did not lie in power alone, but in unity of purpose. Hermione understood. It wants to see that we stand together, Gryffindor, Slytherin, loyalty and courage combined. The serpent lunged suddenly, jaws wide. But its fangs struck not to kill, but to test, forcing them to act as one. Rosier, Hermione, and Helene moved together without thinking, their spells weaving in harmony, shielding one another, defending as a single force. Helene's shield charm met the serpent's strike, while Hermione's wand sent a blinding arc of silver light toward its eyes, not to harm, but to halt. Rosier's voice rang out with a binding charm, threads of green magic twining with Hermione's silver and Helene's pale blue, encircling the serpent in bands of light. The creature paused, shuddered, and lowered its head. "You are worthy," it whispered. "Take the stone. Protect what must not fall." The serpent dissolved into mist, the shadows receding to the edges of the chamber. Hermione stepped forward, heart pounding, and gently lifted the hearthstone from its pedestal. The instant her fingers touched it, warmth spread through her, a steady, grounding strength, as if the stone recognized her purpose and lent its power to hers. Helene touched it too, and Rosier, their hands overlapping. The silver light grew stronger, filling the chamber, pushing back the oppressive darkness. The hunger's distant presence recoiled, unable to approach while the stone's power surged. But Hermione felt the warning in the magic. This was no easy victory. The hearthstone would strengthen the seal, yes, but it would also draw the hunger's full fury. Their time was limited. "We have what we need," she said, her voice steady despite the dread curling in her chest. "Let's go, before it comes for us." They turned back to the narrow stairs, the hearthstone's light guiding their way, as behind them the chamber settled into silence once more. But far above, in the castle's highest towers and deepest walls, the hollow hunger stirred, sensing the shift and preparing to strike. The climb back through the spiraling stair felt longer, heavier, as if the castle itself resisted their return. The hearthstone pulsed between Hermione, Helene, and Rosier, not with fear, but with ancient steady power that seemed to strengthen them with every step. Yet with each pulse, they could feel it, the hunger's attention, like a great eye turning slowly toward them, drawn by the stone's awakening. When they emerged into the Chamber of Secrets, the air was colder. The stone serpents lining the walls seemed to leer, their carved mouths twisted in silent warnings. Hermione shivered despite herself. They had succeeded in finding the hearthstone, but the true test was yet to come. "We need to get this to Dumbledore," Rosier said, his voice tight with urgency. "Now." "No," Helene said quietly. "Not just him. The staff. The centaurs. Everyone. If we're going to use the stone to strengthen the seal, we'll need them all. We can't do this alone." Hermione nodded. "Helene's right. The hunger will strike when we try. We have to be ready." They retraced their steps through the tunnels, through Myrtle's bathroom, and up into the corridors of Hogwarts. The castle was stirring now, students heading to breakfast, the usual hum of daily life returning. But beneath it all, an undercurrent of tension filled the air, as if the castle's stones remembered the night's danger. Dumbledore was waiting for them near the entrance hall, as if he had known they would come. His eyes went first to the hearthstone, then to their faces. "You found it," he said softly. There was both relief and sadness in his voice. "The hearthstone hasn't seen the light in 1,000 years. Hermione held it out. We have to use it. The seal can't hold without it." Dumbledore nodded gravely. "You are correct. But this will not be simple. The hunger will not allow us to bind it without resistance. When we move to strengthen the seal, it will lash out, and the entire castle will be at risk." Helene stepped forward, her eyes hard with determination. "Then we make sure we're ready. We gather everyone. We fight as one." Dumbledore's smile was faint but proud. "You think as the founders once did. Come. There is much to do, and little time." Throughout the day, messages spread quietly but swiftly. The staff gathered in the Great Hall, along with Firenze and a small band of centaurs, their bows slung across their backs. Hagrid prepared what defenses he could, sending owls to the giants of the north. Even the ghosts of Hogwarts, including the Bloody Baron and nearly headless Nick, hovered near, solemn and silent, as if understanding the gravity of what approached. In the afternoon light, Dumbledore addressed them all. His voice carried across the hall, filling it with steady resolve. "The hearthstone will allow us to mend the foundation seal properly. But when we begin, the hunger will rise. It will try to stop us, to break through what remains of the wards and consume everything. We must be ready to defend Hogwarts together, as it was meant to be defended, not by one house or one creature, but by all who call this place home. Hermione glanced at the faces around her. McGonagall, stern but resolute. Flitwick, his small frame brimming with determination. Sprout, wand at the ready, dirt still beneath her nails. Firenze and the centaurs, silent but watchful. Even Snape, standing at the hall's edge, his dark eyes unreadable, but his presence undeniable. Rosier stood beside her and Helene, his jaw set. Whatever mistakes he had made, whatever shadows clung to him, he had chosen his side. That night, as the sun set behind darkening clouds, they gathered at the rune glade once more. The hearthstone was placed at the glade's center, resting within the great rune they had mended days before. Its silver light spread outward, touching the cracks, seeping into the ground, awakening the old magic. Dumbledore raised his wand. It begins. The wards flared to life, and with them, so did the hunger. From deep beneath the earth came a roar without sound, a fury that shook the ground and darkened the air. The green fire returned, swirling at the edges of the glade, and shadows poured from the fissures, taking shape. Monstrous, hollow-eyed forms of magic made hunger, made fear. Hermione gripped Helene's hand. Together, they lifted their wands. And the final battle for Hogwarts began. The air above the rune glade cracked like thunder, though no storm filled the sky. The silver light of the hearthstone pulsed brighter, pushing back the encroaching green flames. But the shadows pressed ever closer, their hollow-eyed forms howling without voices. The ground trembled with each surge of the hunger's fury. Dumbledore stood at the glade's center, his wand raised high, the hearthstone's glow reflected in his half-moon glasses. His voice rose above the storm of magic, weaving ancient incantations that bound the hearthstone's power to the rune beneath their feet. Threads of silver light stretched outward, sinking into the earth, chasing the cracks, sealing them with pure, steady magic. "Hold your positions," he called, his voice steady, resolute. "Guard the hearthstone at all costs." Around the glade's edge, the defenders of Hogwarts braced for the onslaught. McGonagall transformed in a blink into her animagus form, a sleek tabby darting between the shadows to strike where they were weakest. Flitwick stood atop a fallen log, casting protective charms faster than the eye could follow, his small form a blur of defiance. Sprout hurled enchanted seeds that erupted into thorny vines, ensnaring the shadow forms and dragging them down. The centaurs loosed arrow after arrow, their shafts glowing with magic as they struck the hunger's minions, tearing the darkness apart with each shot. Even the ghosts joined the fight, their spectral forms weaving between the enemy, confusing and distracting them. Hermione, Helene, and Rosier fought at Dumbledore's side, their spells woven together in a dance of light and power. Hermione's Protego Maxima formed a dome of silver that repelled the hunger's grasping tendrils. Helene's hexes and curses blasted the shadow creatures apart, each strike filled with the steel will of Slytherin. Rosier, his face pale with effort, poured every ounce of his magic into strengthening the wards, his green spellwork binding with the hearthstone's silver threads. But for every shadow they destroyed, more surged forth. The hunger was not a creature of flesh and blood that could be slain. It was a force, a void, and it came endlessly, hungering for the magic that defied it. "We can't hold them forever," Helene shouted over the din. Her hair was wild, her face streaked with dirt and sweat, but her wand never wavered. "We don't have to," Hermione yelled back. "Just long enough for the seal to take." The hearthstone flared, the silver light rising like a wave. Dumbledore's voice grew louder, the ancient binding spell reaching its crescendo. The rune beneath their feet glowed with searing brilliance, the cracks disappearing as the hearthstone's magic knitted the foundation together. Then the hunger struck in full. A wave of green fire roared across the glade, sweeping aside the shadows, driving straight for the hearthstone and those who guarded it. The defenders braced, their spells rising in a final wall of magic. Hermione felt the force of it like a hammer blow, staggering under the weight. The green flames clashed with the silver light, and for a moment, all was blinding brightness, a clash of hunger and hope. And then silence. The green fire died. The shadows dissolved into mist. The ground stilled, the tremors ceasing. The rune beneath their feet shone whole and unbroken, the hearthstone's light steady, no longer flickering but calm and enduring. The hunger was beaten back. Not destroyed, not yet, but bound once more, its reach sealed away beneath the castle's foundations. The defenders stood breathless, weary beyond words. Dumbledore lowered his wand, his shoulders sagging in relief and exhaustion. "We did it," Rosier said, his voice hoarse, almost disbelieving. "For now," Dumbledore said softly, his eyes scanning the glade, where dawn's first light began to touch the trees. "But this was only the beginning. The hunger knows we are its enemy, and it will not forget." Hermione and Helene exchanged a glance, sisters, twins, Gryffindor and Slytherin, united in purpose. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And Hogwarts, for this day at least, was safe. The glade was eerily quiet in the aftermath of the battle. The silver light of the hearthstone dimmed to a soft glow, its task complete, for now. The rune etched into the earth, once cracked and bleeding magic, was whole. The defenders of Hogwarts stood in the pale morning light, catching their breath, their faces drawn with exhaustion, but their eyes alight with the knowledge that they had endured. Hermione felt as if the weight of the entire night pressed upon her shoulders. Every muscle ached, her mind sluggish with fatigue, but beneath it all, a spark of triumph flickered. They had done it. The hunger had been driven back. Helene lowered her wand, wiping grime from her face with a shaking hand. Her green eyes found Hermione's, and they shared a look that needed no words. Gryffindor and Slytherin, bound not just by blood, but by what they had achieved together. Dumbledore surveyed the glade, his robes scorched at the hem, his face pale but resolute. "We will need to tend to the wounded and see to the wards," he said quietly. "Hogwarts has withstood the first great test. But the hunger is only resting, not defeated. We must prepare for its return." McGonagall stepped forward, her animagus form long gone, her usual sternness softened by the night's ordeal. "The students will be frightened when they hear what has happened. We must decide what to tell them." Dumbledore nodded. "Truth, but not terror. They will know that Hogwarts was defended, that the danger has passed for now, and that they are safe within these walls." Flitwick and Sprout began organizing the staff and centaurs, tending to minor injuries, and inspecting the glade for lingering traces of dark magic. The centaurs lingered at the edge of the forest, their expressions unreadable, but Firenze approached, bow lowered in a gesture of respect. "The stars spoke truly," he said to Dumbledore. "And they warn, this is but the first trial. The darkness beneath the earth stirs yet." Hermione watched him go, his words sinking into her heart like ice. The hunger was bound, but it was far from finished. By midday, the defenders dispersed. The staff returned to the castle, centaurs melted back into the forest, and the glade began to heal. Dumbledore sent Hermione, Helene, and Rosier to rest, though rest seemed impossible with so much still unknown. As they walked back toward the castle, Hermione glanced at Rosier. "You fought for us. For Hogwarts. That means something." Rosier gave a tired laugh. "Don't tell my housemates. They'd never let me live it down." Helene smirked despite herself. "Let them try. We know the truth." But as they neared the entrance, Hermione slowed. Something tugged at her thoughts, a sense that the hunger's reach had not been fully severed. She glanced at the ancient stones of the castle, at the high towers and deep shadows, and wondered what lay hidden still. That night, the castle was quiet, as if even its ghosts needed time to recover. The students knew something had happened. The tension in the air was impossible to hide. But for now, they trusted that their professors had kept them safe. And for now they had. In the Gryffindor common room, Hermione sat by the fire, the hearthstone resting in a velvet pouch on her lap. Its light seeped through the fabric, a soft reminder of what they had won, and what still threatened. Helene joined her, dropping into the chair beside her. "We should be celebrating," she said softly. "But it doesn't feel like it's over." Hermione shook her head. "Because it's not. The hunger will return. And next time it will be stronger." Helene stared into the flames. "Then we'll be stronger too." Hermione smiled faintly. "Together." And in the quiet of that night, the twins made a silent vow. Whatever darkness lay ahead, they would face it side by side, Gryffindor and Slytherin, until the very end. The next morning, Hogwarts stirred with cautious hope. The sun rose over the castle, casting warm light across the battlements, as if to reassure the weary inhabitants that the darkness had been held at bay. Yet beneath the surface calm, the weight of the night's battle still lingered. In the creak of the ancient stones, in the wary glances exchanged in the corridors, in the heavy silence that had fallen over breakfast in the great hall. Hermione and Helene sat side by side, their plates mostly untouched. Across the hall, Rosier slumped at the Slytherin table, his usual smirk gone, replaced by something thoughtful, almost grim. Even the chatter of younger students was subdued, as though the castle itself had impressed upon them the seriousness of what had passed. "Do you feel it?" Helene whispered, leaning closer. Hermione nodded. "The wards are whole. The seal is mended. But the hunger, it's still there. Waiting." Helene's gaze drifted to the enchanted ceiling, where clouds gathered in slow, heavy swirls. Dumbledore was right. That was only the first battle. After breakfast, Dumbledore called a quiet meeting in his office. Hermione, Helene, Rosier, McGonagall, Flitwick, and Sprout gathered around the headmaster's desk. The hearthstone rested in its velvet pouch upon a silver stand, its light faint but steady. Dumbledore's eyes swept over them all, kind but grave. "You have done something remarkable. The Foundation seal is whole for the first time in centuries. But the hunger is not defeated. We cannot let ourselves believe the danger has passed." Flitwick stood on his chair so he could better see over the desk. "The wards held last night because we acted together. That is our strength." Sprout nodded. "And we must use this reprieve wisely. Strengthen the grounds. Reinforce the protections. Alert our allies beyond these walls." Dumbledore turned to the twins. "And you too, you have a bond, a rare unity of heart and mind, Gryffindor and Slytherin as one." The hearthstone answered to that. "I believe it will again. But I also believe the hunger may now seek to divide you. It will know where our strength lies." Hermione felt a cold knot in her stomach. "We won't let it." Helene's voice was steady. "Never." As the meeting ended, Dumbledore entrusted the hearthstone to the twins, instructing them to keep it safe until it could be permanently secured within the castle's deepest vault. But as they descended the spiral staircase, the weight of the stone in Hermione's pocket felt heavier than mere crystal. It felt like responsibility and danger. The rest of the day passed in a strange hush. The students returned to lessons, but their hearts weren't in them. Whispers of the battle filled the halls, half-truths and rumors mingling with the truth. That Hogwarts had faced a threat unseen in living memory and had survived by the narrowest margin. That night, the twins stood together at a window overlooking the grounds. The forbidden forest lay dark and still beyond the lawns, and the sky was awash of stars. The castle seemed peaceful, but that peace was fragile, a thin veil over the storm that would come again. "I wonder where it waits," Helene said softly. "The hunger. What it thinks. If it thinks." Hermione hugged her arms around herself. "It doesn't think like we do. It wants. It takes. And it never stops." Below, a shadow flickered at the edge of the forest, or so it seemed. But when Hermione looked again, there was nothing. Still, a chill ran down her spine. "We'll be ready," she said. "Next time, we'll be ready." And as they stood in the quiet night, the wind stirred the trees, carrying with it a faint, distant whisper from the earth's depths, a reminder that the hollow hunger had not forgotten them. Days passed, and though Hogwarts resumed its routines, a tension remained, a quiet knowledge shared by those who had stood in the glade. The castle was whole, the wards intact, but the hunger's presence had not faded. It lingered, unseen but felt, like a storm waiting beyond the horizon. Hermione and Helene kept the hearthstone hidden, as Dumbledore instructed, carrying it with them at all times. The silver glow of the crystal had dimmed, but its power pulsed beneath the surface, like a heartbeat in their hands. The castle seemed to sense it, staircases pausing in their shifting when the twins passed, portraits leaning closer to watch. One evening, as twilight deepened and the corridors emptied, Rosier found them in the library, surrounded by stacks of books and ancient scrolls. His green eyes were shadowed by sleeplessness, but sharp with purpose. "I think I've found something," he said without preamble, dropping a heavy tome on the table. The cover was cracked with age, the lettering faded to near illegibility. "The Builder's Ledger." Helene frowned, pulling the book closer. "I've heard of this. Records from Hogwarts construction. But it was said to be lost." Rosier smirked faintly. "It was in the restricted section, hidden behind a row of false bindings. I think Dumbledore left it there for us to find, when the time was right." Hermione flipped through the brittle pages, her breath catching as she spotted a familiar symbol. The rune of the hearthstone, etched in the margin beside a rough sketch of the castle's foundations. But there was something more. A passage beneath the foundations, marked only by a single word, vault. A vault, Hermione whispered. A place they hid something even deeper than the hearthstone. Rosier nodded. A vault meant to contain what the seal couldn't destroy. The hunger itself. They didn't just bind it, they tried to trap it. But the vault was abandoned, its entrance forgotten. Until now. Helene's eyes gleamed with dangerous excitement. If we could find it, we could end this. Hermione hesitated. The idea was bold, reckless even. But the thought of ending the hunger's threat once and for all burned bright in her heart. Where is it? Rosier tapped the page. Beneath the dungeons. Deeper than the Chamber of Secrets. A stair that spirals into the bedrock. They made their decision without another word. That night, cloaked in shadows, they descended into the castle's depths, moving past the familiar corridors of the dungeons, past the kitchens, past even the chamber's hidden entrance. Every step took them deeper into the bones of the castle, where the air grew cold and the walls wept moisture from ancient stones. At last, they found it, a narrow archway half-collapsed with rubble, its edges carved with faint runes so old they barely showed beneath centuries of dust and moss. Rosier cleared the debris with a flick of his wand, revealing stairs that plunged into darkness. Hermione held out the hearthstone. Its light flared, as if recognizing this place. This is it. They began the descent, their wand lights barely touching the blackness that clung to the walls. The air smelled of earth and time, of magic too old to name. The deeper they went, the more they felt it. The hunger's presence, stronger here than anywhere else. It pulsed beneath their feet, as if the vault itself was a prison not quite strong enough to contain what lay inside. At last, they reached a vast door of stone and iron, covered in runes that glowed faintly as they approached. The door seemed to hum with power, but also with warning. Helene laid a hand on the cold metal. "We've found it. The vault of the hunger." Hermione's heart pounded. "Now what?" Rosier's voice was low. "Now we decide. Do we risk opening it, or find a way to strengthen its lock forever?" The choice loomed before them, as heavy as the door itself. Behind it waited either salvation or destruction. The door loomed before them, a monolith of stone and iron, its surface etched with ancient runes that pulsed faintly in the dim wand light. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of ages and the oppressive presence of what lay beyond. Even the hearthstone's steady glow seemed subdued here, as if the magic of the vault drained the light itself. Hermione stared at the runes, trying to decipher their meaning. The language was older than anything she'd studied at Hogwarts, older even than the records in the restricted section. But certain symbols repeated: bind, contain, sacrifice. The words filled her with dread and wonder in equal measure. "We shouldn't open it," she said at last, her voice tight. "Not unless we're sure we can control what's inside. We could unleash the very thing we've fought so hard to hold back." Rosier's face was pale, his hand hovering near the runes. "But what if there's something within that can destroy the hunger? What if this is the key the Founders left for us?" Helene's eyes flicked between them. Her voice was quiet but firm. "We came down here for a reason. We have to see it through. But we do it our way, carefully. Together." Hermione took a deep breath and nodded. "Agreed. Let's see what protections are on the door. There must be clues." They worked side by side, studying the runes, tracing them with their wands, casting detection spells. Slowly, the secrets of the vault revealed themselves. The door was bound with layers of magic, locks that required not just spells, but intent, the united will of those who sought to protect, not to claim. Blood wards tied to the line of the Founders. And a final seal keyed to the magic of the hearthstone itself. Hermione felt the truth settle over her like a cloak. It can only be opened by those who act not for themselves, but for Hogwarts. That's why it stayed hidden all these centuries. Rosier touched the hearthstone gently, as if afraid to disturb its fragile peace. "Then we do this together." They positioned themselves before the door. Hermione on the left, wand raised. Helene on the right, her Slytherin cunning sharpened to purpose. Rosier in the center, the hearthstone held between his hands. Together, they spoke the unlocking charm, their voices blending into one. The runes flared to life, light surging across the surface of the door like lightning. The stone shuddered, groaned, and began to part down the middle, a deep rumble filling the chamber as the ancient mechanism moved for the first time in 1,000 years. Beyond lay darkness, not the simple absence of light, but a darkness that felt alive, watching, waiting. The three stepped through the threshold, their wan lights barely piercing the gloom. The vault was vast, carved directly into the bedrock, its walls lined with massive chains and iron bindings, many of them broken or rusted through. In the center lay a great pit, and from that pit rose a cold wind that stank of rot and void. Hermione felt it immediately, the hunger. Stronger than it had ever felt above. Its presence coiled around them, unseen but suffocating. Helene's voice was a whisper. This was no prison. This was a tomb. And the tomb failed. The hearthstone's light flared, casting silver radiance into the pit. And there, for a heartbeat, they saw it. The hollow hunger's true form. A vast, shifting shadow, its edges undefined, its body made of darkness and ruin, eyes like empty stars staring up at them. Rosier staggered back, his breath stolen by terror. It's awake. Hermione's mind raced. No, it's stirring. We can still act. We can seal it deeper, stronger. But we need help. We can't do this alone. Helene gritted her teeth. Then we call Dumbledore. The staff. The centaurs. Everyone. And as they fled the vault, sealing the great door behind them with magic and will, the hunger's voice echoed up the passage. Not words, but a promise of return. The race had begun again. The vault was found, the secret laid bare, and the final battle drew nearer. The ancient door sealed behind them with a deep, resonant thud, the runes along its surface dimming once more to faint glimmers in the dark. The cold presence of the hunger faded slightly, muffled by the wards they had reforged in haste. But it was still there, patient, biding its time beneath the stones of Hogwarts. Hermione's heart pounded as they climbed back toward the dungeons. The air seemed thinner, as if the castle itself held its breath. Every footfall echoed like a warning. We shouldn't have gone down there alone, Rosier said, his voice strained. We were lucky this time. Next time. There won't be a next time like that, Hermione said, fierce with purpose. Next time we bring everyone. We plan. We end this. Helene didn't speak, but the look she gave Hermione said everything. Agreement, resolve, and the same determination that had kept them side by side through every danger. By the time they reached the great hall, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting long bars of light through the tall windows. Dumbledore was already waiting, as if he had known they would come. His eyes, normally so warm, were grave as he listened to their tale. You found it, he said at last. The vault beneath the foundation. I feared as much. I had hoped it was legend. But legend in this castle is often truth in waiting. We saw it, Headmaster, Hermione said. Its true form. The hunger's prison is failing. The chains were broken. It's only a matter of time before it rises. Dumbledore nodded slowly, his gaze distant, as if looking back through centuries. Then we must act before it chooses the moment of its escape. Gather the staff. The centaurs. Any who will stand with us. We will form the last line of defense this castle may ever need. And so the castle stirred again, not with fear, but with preparation. Messages were sent to the forest, to the mountains, to distant allies who still remembered the debts they owed Hogwarts. The staff assembled in the Hall of Records, joined by Firenze and his kin, Hagrid and his allies among the magical beasts, even the ghosts of the castle who offered what aid they could. Dumbledore stood at the center of the great circle they formed. The hearthstone floated above his palm, its silver glow bright again, as if it too sensed the coming storm. The time has come to do what the founders could not, he said. We will not merely seal the hunger. We will end it, but it will cost us. And we must be united, all houses, all creatures, all hearts, or we will fall. McGonagall stepped forward, her voice firm. You have my wand, Albus. Whatever it takes. Flitwick, Sprout, Sinistra, Vector, even Snape, each pledged the same, without hesitation. Firenze inclined his head, the centaurs beside him silent in agreement. Hagrid grinned grimly, his great hands clenching around his pink umbrella. And at Dumbledore's side stood Hermione and Helene, Gryffindor and Slytherin, their bond stronger than ever. The twin hearts of the defense to come. Plans were drawn, not only to hold the castle, but to strike at the vault itself, to weave a new binding that would not merely chain the hunger, but tear its presence from the earth. The hearthstone would be their key. The courage of Gryffindor, the cunning of Slytherin, the wisdom of Ravenclaw, and the loyalty of Hufflepuff, combined in one final stand. As night fell once more over Hogwarts, the defenders took their positions. The wards glowed brighter than they had in centuries. The runes around the castle shimmered with new magic, reinforced by every willing heart within those walls. And deep below, the hollow hunger stirred, sensing its moment drawing near, and the final challenge that waited above. The castle seemed to hold its breath as the final preparations took shape. Every stone of Hogwarts, every stair and corridor, every window and turret hummed faintly with the magic poured into it by those who had sworn to defend it. The hearthstone's light pulsed gently in the center of the great hall, where Dumbledore and the staff gathered one last time before the storm. Hermione and Helene stood together beneath the floating candles, their wands at their sides, their faces set with quiet resolve. The hall, usually filled with the chatter of students and the clatter of cutlery, was silent tonight except for the steady hum of ancient wards reforged by countless spells. Dumbledore spoke at last, his voice steady, yet touched with sadness and pride. When the sun rises, we will meet our fate. The hunger will rise to challenge us, sensing that its prison can no longer hold it. But we have something it has never understood. Unity. Choice. Hope. These are the weapons that no shadow can consume. McGonagall, standing tall and fierce beside him, added, "The students will be kept safe. We'll not allow them near the battleground. But the castle itself, she will fight with us. You'll see." Firenze stepped forward, his silver mane catching the light. "The stars foretell this night. But remember, destiny is not written in stone. It is shaped by what we choose. And tonight we choose to stand." Rosier lingered at the edge of the group, his eyes on Hermione and Helene. No second chances this time. When it begins, it will not stop until one side is broken. Hermione met his gaze. "Then we don't break." Helene nodded. "And we don't let each other fall." As the meeting ended, the defenders dispersed to their posts, professors to their towers and walls, centaurs to the edge of the forbidden forest, magical creatures hidden in the shadows, ready to strike when called. The ghosts of Hogwarts floated silently through the corridors, watching, waiting, bound to the castle they had once called home. Hermione and Helene made their way to the astronomy tower, where the night sky stretched vast and endless above them. Stars glittered cold and bright, as if watching the final hours before dawn. Hermione leaned against the stone railing, feeling the night wind in her hair. "Do you think we'll survive this?" Helene didn't answer right away. She looked out over the grounds, where faint lights marked the sentries' positions, where the dark forest loomed like a silent sentinel. "We have to. We're the last line between Hogwarts and that thing. We have to." Hermione drew a deep breath, steadying herself. "If we don't make it—" "No," Helene interrupted, her voice sharp. "We will. Don't speak like that. We fight and we win. Together." Their fingers found each other's, and for a long moment they simply stood, side by side, the wind tugging at their robes, the castle quiet around them. Below, in the heart of Hogwarts, the hearthstone continued to glow. Its light seeped into the stones, into the wards, into every part of the ancient castle. The final weaving of the great binding spell had begun, powered by the magic of the Founder's heirs, and the courage of those who stood for what Hogwarts truly meant. And far beneath the ground, the hollow hunger felt its prison strain. The last chains cracked. The runes faltered, and it prepared to rise. The first rays of dawn stretched over the horizon, washing the towers of Hogwarts in pale gold. But there was no peace in that light. The castle groaned softly beneath their feet, as if warning its defenders of what was to come. A deep vibration spread through the stones, the unmistakable sign that the hollow hunger was awakening. Hermione and Helene raced down from the astronomy tower, robes billowing behind them, wands clutched tightly. They met Rosier in the entrance hall, where Dumbledore and the staff were already gathering. The hearthstone hovered above Dumbledore's palm, its silver glow no longer soft and steady but fierce, flaring in time with the tremors that shook the ground. "It's beginning," Dumbledore said quietly. His eyes were bright, determined. "The last of the vault's chains are breaking. We must act now, before it bursts free entirely." The great oak doors of the castle swung open, revealing the defenders already assembled on the grounds. The centaurs stood in ranks at the edge of the forest, bows strung and ready. Hagrid led creatures from the forest, thestrals, bowtruckles, even a few towering trolls loyal to him, their eyes dull but focused. Ghosts hovered above the battlements, their spectral forms flickering in the early light. McGonagall's voice rang out over the courtyard. "To your positions. This is where we stand." Hermione felt the hum of magic beneath her feet as she and Helene took their place beside Dumbledore, Flitwick, and Sprout at the center of the lawn, directly above the sealed vault. The final binding spell had been prepared, a great lattice of runes, wards, and charms, woven together by every defender's magic. Now they would cast it as one. But even as they lifted their wands, the ground split with a deafening crack. A jagged fissure tore across the grass, and from its depths came a torrent of green fire, the hunger's fury unleashed. The air grew heavy, choked with the stench of decay and ruin. Shadows poured forth, not shapeless this time, but formed into creatures of nightmare. Serpents of flame, wolves with hollow eyes, things that crawled and leapt and tore at the earth. "Hold your line," Dumbledore commanded, his voice rising over the chaos. The hearthstone's silver light shot upward, forming a great dome over the defenders, holding back the tide of darkness, for now. Hermione and Helene stood shoulder to shoulder, their wands moving in perfect unison. Hermione's charms of protection interwove with Helene's curses of banishment, each spell amplifying the other. Their magic sang through the air, a harmony of Gryffindor courage and Slytherin cunning, as they forced the hunger's minions back. From the walls, arrows rained down, centaur and human alike firing in deadly rhythm. Sprout's enchanted plants burst from the soil, entangling and crushing shadow beasts. Flitwick's charms flashed like lightning, severing tendrils of green fire before they could reach the castle. But the hunger was vast, its fury endless. The fissure widened, splitting the lawn, and from it rose the hunger's true form. A towering mass of shadow and flame, eyes like endless voids, its voice a rumble of want that shook their bones. Dumbledore raised the hearthstone high, and the defenders began the binding spell. Their voices rose as one, words of ancient power filling the air, the runes beneath their feet glowing brighter and brighter. The hearthstone's silver light shot down into the earth, seeking the hunger's core. The hunger struck at the dome of light, green fire crashing against silver wards. The ground trembled as it fought to break free, but the defenders held fast, their magic pushing back, sealing the cracks, weaving the final prison. Hermione felt her strength draining, her magic pouring into the binding, but she did not falter. Beside her, Helene's face was pale but fierce, her spells sharp and sure. And in that moment, as the spell reached its peak, the hearthstone blazed with blinding light. The combined will of all who stood for Hogwarts channeled into one final act. The hunger screamed, a soundless roar of rage and defeat, as the bindings took hold, chains of pure magic sinking into the earth, the fissure closing, the green fire snuffed out. When the light faded, silence fell. The ground was whole, the vault sealed, the hunger trapped, deeper and tighter than ever before. But the cost had been great. The defenders stood drained, the hearthstone dim, its power spent. The battle was won, but the scars it left would linger forever. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the battlefield. But where sunlight touched, it revealed the scars of the night. Scorched earth where green fire had raged, shattered stones from the hunger's final strike, and defenders slumped in exhaustion, their magic spent, their strength drained. Hermione swayed where she stood, feeling the last flicker of her power ebb away as the hearthstone's glow finally faded to a dull shimmer. Her arm trembled, wand hanging loosely in her grasp. But she was upright. She was alive. And Helene was at her side, just as she had been from the start. The great fissure that had torn the lawn was gone, sealed beneath layers of silvered magic and the weight of the final binding. No trace of the hunger's form remained above ground. No green fire, no shadow beasts. Only the deep quiet of a castle that had survived the storm. Dumbledore lowered his hand, the hearthstone resting now upon the grass, its task complete. His face was pale, lined with weariness, but his eyes still held that steady light, the light of hope fulfilled, if only for now. "We did it," Helene said, her voice hoarse. "It's done." Hermione looked at the sealed earth. For how long? Dumbledore heard the question, though it had not been meant for him. Long enough. Longer than before. Perhaps, this time, long enough for new magic to grow where old wounds have closed. Around them, the defenders began to gather, drawing together in the aftermath. McGonagall, robes torn and singed but head held high, walked the line of exhausted fighters, offering nods of approval and thanks. Flitwick leaned on his wand for support, a tired but fierce grin on his face. Sprout tended to a wounded centaur, murmuring comfort as she wrapped his flank in enchanted bandages. Even Snape lingered, his expression unreadable, but present, his loyalty to Hogwarts proven beyond doubt. Rosier approached the twins, his usual swagger gone, replaced by quiet respect. You two held the line. Without you, without both of you, we wouldn't have made it. Helene gave him a tired smile. Without all of us, Rosier. This wasn't a victory of one person. It was Hogwarts. The centaurs melted back into the forest, their task done. The magical creatures Hagrid had rallied drifted back into the wild. The ghosts of the castle floated silently above, watchful, as if standing vigil over the sealed vault below. By evening, the castle grounds were cleared. The wounded were tended, the wards restored. The hearthstone, its power spent, was placed in a new resting place. Deep within the castle's heart, where no hand could reach without the will of all four houses united. That night, the great hall glowed softly with candlelight as the defenders gathered for a quiet meal. Not of celebration, but of relief, of survival. There was no grand feast, no wild cheer. Only the quiet knowledge that they had faced the darkness and together had endured. Hermione sat beside Helene at the Gryffindor table, though no one minded tonight where anyone sat. House boundaries had blurred, as if the castle itself understood that in this battle, there had been no Gryffindor, no Slytherin, no Hufflepuff, no Ravenclaw. Only Hogwarts. As they ate, Hermione glanced at the enchanted ceiling, where the stars shone clear and bright above. And for the first time in weeks, she felt no fear of what might lie below. Helene nudged her gently. We made it, and we'll make it again if we have to. Hermione smiled, weary but certain. Yes, we will. And far beneath the castle, in the silence of the sealed vault, the hunger slept once more, bound by the will and unity of those who had chosen hope over fear, light over shadow. The days that followed the battle passed in a strange hush. Hogwarts seemed to exhale, as if the ancient stones themselves had been holding their breath. The castle was alive again with quiet purpose. Repairs, healing, and reflection filled the corridors and classrooms. The scars of the fight remained, blackened patches on the grounds where the hunger's fire had raged, cracks in old walls where the earth had split, and above all, the memory of standing at the brink of ruin and turning it back. Hermione and Helene found themselves at the heart of this fragile peace. They had fought side by side, and now they worked side by side to help the castle and its people recover. Together, they assisted Sprout in regrowing the burned patches of grass and coaxing damaged plants back to life. They helped Flitwick reinforce charms on the castle's defenses, ensuring no lingering trace of the hunger's magic remained to poison the wards. Yet even as they busied themselves, both twins felt it, a restlessness, as though the victory they'd won hadn't closed the chapter fully. The hunger was sealed, yes, but not destroyed. And in the quiet moments, that knowledge whispered at the edge of their thoughts. One afternoon, as soft spring rain pattered against the windows of the library, Hermione sat at a table buried beneath old tomes. Helene slouched in the chair opposite, her boots propped up, flipping through a battered book of Slytherin history. You're thinking about it again, Helene said without looking up. Hermione didn't bother denying it. There's no guarantee it'll stay bound forever. The hunger's been sealed before. And each time it broke free again. Helene shut her book with a soft thump. So what do? We can't go back down there without a plan. And we can't keep living like we're waiting for the next disaster. Hermione hesitated. Maybe we find a way to understand it. Not just fight it. Every time it's been sealed, it was treated like an enemy to destroy. What if that's why it keeps coming back? What if we're missing something? Helene raised a brow. Hermione Granger, are you suggesting we talk to the giant evil force of destruction under the castle? Hermione huffed, but smiled despite herself. I'm suggesting we learn. There's more to this. There has to be. The Founders left secrets we still haven't uncovered. The Hearthstone responded to us because of who we are. Maybe the Hunger's story is tied to ours more deeply than we know. Rosier appeared at their table then, dropping into a chair and setting down a tray of tea and biscuits pilfered from the kitchens. His usual smirk was back, if only faintly. If you two are planning another insane adventure, count me in. I'm not missing the next catastrophe. Helene snorted. It's not a catastrophe, it's research. For now. Rosier raised his cup in mock salute. Famous last words. That night, the twins stood once more on the astronomy tower, the castle quiet beneath them. The stars stretched endless above, the grounds peaceful in the moonlight. But beneath that peace, they knew the Hunger slept, and their work was not yet done. We saved Hogwarts, Helene said. But now we find the truth. No more waiting for the darkness to come to us. Hermione nodded, her heart steady. Together. And so began a new chapter, not of battle, but of discovery. A quest not to seal the Hunger again, but to understand its origin, its purpose, and perhaps how to end its threat forever. Spring deepened across the castle grounds, softening the harsh scars left by battle. The air was fresher now, carrying the scent of new grass and blooming flowers where charred earth had once lain. But for Hermione and Helene, peace remained an illusion, a thin veil over questions left unanswered. The library became their second home. Day after day, the twins and Rosier combed through volumes so old they crumbled at the edges, scrolls so faded that spells were needed just to read them. They weren't looking for battle spells or defense charms. Not this time. They hunted history, the truth of the Hunger. Rosier yawned, stretching out his long legs beneath their table. I'm starting to think the Founders didn't leave clues. Maybe they were just really good at burying their failures. Helene, cross-legged on her chair, flipped through a volume on magical geology. Or maybe the clues were never meant for just anyone. Maybe they were meant for people like us. Hermione paused over a battered, slim book. Foundations of Hogwarts, the ink faded but legible. A phrase near the end of a chapter caught her eye. The deep stone remembers what the castle cannot. Beneath the Founder's seal lies the echo, and beyond that the origin. Her heart quickened. Listen to this, she said, reading the line aloud. Rosier straightened. The echo? The origin? That's the first new thing we've found in weeks. Helene leaned in, her green eyes bright. The deep stone, the Founder's seal, that's not just the vault. It's deeper. Below even the vault we saw. Hermione nodded, mind racing. What if what we sealed wasn't the Hunger's true core? What if it was only the remnant that broke free of something even deeper? They shared a look, one of certainty, of renewed purpose. By nightfall, they were back at the entrance hall, cloaked and ready. Dumbledore caught them as they made for the stairs to the dungeons. He studied their faces, saw the resolve there, and did not try to stop them. Be careful, he said quietly. The castle's oldest secrets are hidden for a reason, and some truths may demand a price you do not expect. We'll be back, Hermione promised. Down into the depths they went again, past the familiar turns of the dungeons, past the place where the great door of the vault still pulsed faintly with sealing magic. But this time they searched for more. Their wand lights probed every shadow, seeking the next hidden path. It was Rosier who found it, a hairline crack in the stone floor near the sealed vault, a flaw almost invisible. When he traced it with his wand, the crack glowed faint gold, and with a grinding groan, a hidden stair spiraled open beneath their feet. Cold air rushed upward, air untouched for 1,000 years. Helene grinned, excitement breaking through her fatigue. Looks like we're the first to see this since the Founders. Hermione drew a deep breath, the weight of the moment sinking in. Let's go. Down they went, the air growing colder, the stone underfoot older than anything above. The walls glimmered with veins of silver ore, the deep stone itself, the foundation of Hogwarts. And at the stair's end, a small chamber, circular, its walls covered in runes that hummed softly at their approach. In the center stood a single pillar of black stone. Upon it, carved in silver letters, was one word. Echo. The room thrummed with power, ancient waiting. Helene stepped forward, wonder in her voice. We found it. The first true key. Hermione felt the pulse of magic in the air. Now we learn its story. And the echo seemed to answer, the runes flickering to life, the chamber's secret ready at last to be revealed. The runes along the chamber walls pulsed softly, their silver glow weaving patterns across the ancient stone. The air felt charged, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for the right words to awaken secrets long buried. Hermione, Helene, and Rosier stood in a tense silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Hermione stepped closer to the pillar marked Echo, feeling its magic hum beneath her fingertips. "It's waiting for something," she whispered. "A spell? A phrase? Maybe the will of those who seek the truth." Helene's eyes scanned the glowing runes. "No ordinary unlocking charm will work here. This is founder magic. We need to match its purpose. Its intent." Rosier gave a short nod, his usual sarcasm stripped away. "Then what do we say? How do we prove we're worthy?" Hermione closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. Then, with clarity born of everything they'd endured, she spoke, her voice soft but sure. "We seek the origin not for power, but to protect. We are heirs of Hogwarts, united in purpose. Open to us the truth." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the runes blazed brighter, silver light swirling around the chamber like mist. The black stone pillar began to shift, reshaping itself, forming a hollow at its top where a shimmering pool of liquid silver appeared. A voice filled the chamber, not loud, not harsh, but resonant, as if spoken by the castle itself. "Neither male nor female, neither kind nor cruel. You seek the origin. You seek the truth. Then listen and remember." Images rose from the silver pool, casting light across the walls. They saw a younger Hogwarts, its towers newly built, its walls bright with fresh magic. The four founders stood together, united in purpose. But beneath the castle, in secret, they crafted a prison, not for a creature of the forest or a rival wizard, but for a force older than any of them. A darkness drawn from the earth itself when the castle's foundations were laid, a byproduct of the magic they used to bind Hogwarts to the land. "The hunger was born of their making," the voice continued. "A shadow of power unchecked. They sealed it, swore it would never rise. But the seal was imperfect. Each time it stirs, it feeds on strife, on division, on fear. And each time, the binding weakens." The vision shifted, scenes of the hunger's many risings over the centuries. During times of war, of civil strife, of betrayal within the castle's walls. Each time, the defenders sealed it again but never destroyed it. Helene's face was pale, her green eyes fierce. "It wasn't some ancient evil buried here. We made it. Hogwarts made it." Rosier's voice was low, stunned. "That's why it keeps coming back. Because it's part of the castle itself. A shadow the founders couldn't erase." Hermione clenched her fists, mind racing. "Then the only way to end it is to heal what they broke. We have to finish what they couldn't." The voice spoke again, quieter now, as if fading. "The origin waits. Beyond the echo lies the final chamber. Only those who stand as one may enter. Only those who seek to mend, not to bind, may succeed." The silver pool stilled, the light dimmed, and the chamber grew silent once more. Hermione looked at her sister and Rosier, heart pounding. "We're closer than we've ever been. The origin is real. And now we know where to go." Helene nodded, fire in her eyes. "Then let's find it. And let's end this." Rosier managed a grin. "I'm in. For Hogwarts. And for us." Together, they turned from the echo, ready for the next step, toward the origin and the castle's deepest truth. The chamber of the echo stood quiet once more, the silver runes dimming to a faint, watchful glow. But something had changed. The air itself seemed to hum with expectation, as if the castle sensed that its oldest secret was about to be faced. Hermione, Helene, and Rosier stood before the pillar, their resolve hardening as the path ahead revealed itself. A soft grinding sound broke the silence. At the far end of the chamber, a seam appeared in the stone wall. Dust drifted from the edges as the seam widened, stone folding inward to reveal a narrow archway leading into blackness beyond. Rosier exhaled slowly. "Looks like the echo listened. There's our way forward." Hermione tightened her grip on her wand. "Stay close. We don't know what protections the founders placed on the origin. And whatever lies ahead, it's waited centuries for this." They stepped through the archway, their wand lights casting long, thin beams into the darkness. The passage beyond was ancient, older than even the vault where the hunger had been sealed. The walls were smooth, the stone darker than any above, shot through with veins of silver that pulsed faintly, as if reacting to their presence. The air grew colder the deeper they went, but not with the damp chill of the dungeons. This was a deeper cold, one that seeped into bone and thought, as if the very magic of the place resisted being disturbed. Helene glanced at the walls, her Slytherin instincts sharp. This isn't just a passage. It's a test. The magic here is watching us. Hermione felt it too, a pressure subtle but real, probing their intent. She spoke softly, not to the others, but to the castle itself. We're here to heal, not to control, not to bind again. We're here to mend what was broken. The pressure eased, the silver veins glowing warmer in response. The path accepted them. Down they went, the stair spiraling deeper than any of them imagined the castle reached. At last, the passage opened into a vast chamber unlike anything they had seen. The ceiling soared high above, lost in shadow. The floor was a single slab of polished stone, etched with runes that formed a massive circle around the room's edge. At the chamber's heart stood a great crystal, black as night, shot through with threads of silver and green. It pulsed slowly as if breathing. Above the crystal, suspended in the air, swirled the faint shape of the hunger. But here, in this place, it seemed smaller, weaker, trapped in the pull of the Origin's magic. Hermione stared in awe. That's it. The Origin. The source of it all. Rosier swallowed hard. What do we do now? Helene stepped forward, her voice clear. We finish what the Founders started, but right this time. No more chains. No more seals. We find the fracture and we heal it. Hermione nodded. Together, they raised their wands as one. The chamber seemed to lean in around them, as if the stones themselves were listening. The magic of Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff, all present in spirit through the unity of those who stood there, flowed into the air. Hermione spoke the first word of the healing charm, an ancient spell of mending and wholeness. Helene followed, her voice weaving Slytherin's strength into the spell. Rosier added his voice, steady and sure, binding their magic into one purpose. The Origin pulsed brighter, the hunger's shape flickering, shrinking, as the magic of repair reached into the crystal's heart. The silver threads within began to glow, knitting together what had been torn apart so long ago. The chamber shook, the ancient magic resisting, but yielding. And at last, the hunger's form faded, drawn back into the healed crystal, its shadow undone. Hermione felt it as the magic settled, peace. True peace. The fracture mended, the danger gone not for a time, but for good. They had done what the Founders could not. They had ended it. The deep chamber of the Origin lay still at last. No tremor stirred the stone beneath their feet. No shadow lingered in the air. The great black crystal at the chamber's heart stood silent, whole, and at peace. Its silver veins now bright and steady, no longer pulsing with fractured magic. The hunger was gone. Not sealed, not trapped, gone. The wound in Hogwarts' heart was healed. For a long moment, Hermione, Helene, and Rosier simply stood in the stillness, breathing in the quiet. The centuries-old weight of the castle's hidden burden had lifted, and they felt it in their bones. The difference was as real as the ground beneath their feet. Helene broke the silence first, her voice soft but fierce. We did it. Really did it. Hermione nodded, her eyes shining with relief and wonder. For the first time in 1,000 years, Hogwarts is whole. Rosier gave a shaky laugh, scrubbing a hand through his hair. I'm going to need a month's sleep after this. They made their way back up the long spiral, leaving the Origin behind, its magic settled and sure. As they ascended, the castle itself seemed changed. The oppressive heaviness that had haunted its stones was gone. The air felt cleaner, the wards stronger, as though the ancient magic of the Founders now stood unbroken for the first time since Hogwarts was built. When they emerged from the hidden stair at last, blinking in the bright morning light that streamed through the entrance hall windows, they were met by the faces of those who had waited, worried. Dumbledore was there, his blue eyes bright behind his half-moon spectacles. McGonagall, Sprout, Flitwick, Snape, all of them standing in a quiet semicircle, as if sensing something profound had changed. Hermione spoke first. It's done. The hunger won't rise again. We healed the Origin itself. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then Dumbledore smiled, a true, deep smile that touched his eyes, that seemed to ease the years from his face. You three have given Hogwarts a gift beyond price, and shown courage, wisdom, and unity that even the founders would envy. McGonagall's eyes glistened. You've written a new chapter of this castle's history. Sprout stepped forward, beaming. And I imagine the castle's magic will be all the stronger for it. The plants are already thriving where the battle scarred them. Even Snape gave a slow, respectful nod. You've done what none of us imagined possible. The days that followed became a time of quiet renewal. The twins and Rosier worked alongside staff and students to restore what little damage remained. Magic flowed easily through the halls, as if the castle itself rejoiced in its mending. House rivalries softened. After all, Gryffindor, Slytherin, and even Rosier's unaligned cunning had saved them all. At night, Hermione and Helene often found themselves on the astronomy tower again, watching the stars in the clear, peaceful sky. We'll graduate soon, Helene said one evening, her voice thoughtful. No more hunger. No more secrets. What comes next for us? Hermione smiled, leaning against the stone rail. Whatever we choose. We've earned that. And as the term drew to a close, Hogwarts stood stronger, brighter, and freer than it had in centuries. Thanks to two sisters, once divided by house, now united forever by choice, by courage, and by love for the place they called home. The final weeks of the school year passed in a harmony Hogwarts hadn't known in centuries. With the hunger gone and the castle's foundation healed, a subtle but profound change swept through the halls. The walls seemed warmer, the staircases less temperamental, the very air of the castle filled with ease rather than tension. It was as if the magic of the place, long burdened by the fracture below, could at last breathe free. Hermione and Helene moved through those final days with a strange blend of joy and quiet sadness. They had fought so long for Hogwarts' survival. Now that peace had come, they found themselves wondering what would come next. The day of their leaving arrived at last. The great hall shone with the light of summer, its ceiling mirroring a cloudless sky. The long tables were filled with students sharing laughter, memories, and hopeful plans. The banners of all four houses hung together, a symbol of the unity that had grown since the final battle. Dumbledore rose to speak as the meal ended, his gaze sweeping the hall with pride. This year, he said, has tested us as few others have. But it has also reminded us of who we are and what Hogwarts truly stands for. Bravery, yes. Intelligence, loyalty, and ambition, all of these. But above all, unity. When we stand together, there is no darkness we cannot face. His eyes lingered on Hermione and Helene, then on Rosier, who sat between them as he always seemed to now. Let us honor those who reminded us of that truth. The hall erupted in applause, genuine and heartfelt. Even the ghosts joined in, their applause faint but clear. Hermione felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she smiled, glancing at Helene, who smirked, nudging her shoulder. Heroes now, are we? Helene teased quietly. Just glad we made it through, Hermione replied, though her heart swelled with pride. Their trunks were packed, their wands sheathed. The Hogwarts Express waited to carry them away from the place that had been their home, their battlefield, and their greatest teacher. On the platform, as steam hissed and students bustled, the twins lingered, looking up at the castle one last time. Rosier stood with them, hands in his pockets, expression unusually thoughtful. So, he said, glancing between them, where to now? I don't see either of you settling for quiet little ministry jobs. Hermione laughed. I don't think the world's ready for that. Helene tilted her head, considering. I think we start by seeing what else is out there that needs mending. There's more than one broken magic in the world. Rosier grinned. Count me in. Someone's got to keep you two out of trouble. The train whistle blew. The three climbed aboard, finding an empty compartment where the countryside would blur past the windows, and the future would stretch wide ahead of them. Uncharted, uncertain, and full of promise. And as the train pulled away, Hogwarts stood watching over them, whole at last, its towers bright in the sunlight, its secrets laid to rest. But in its stones, it carried the memory of two sisters who had given it peace, and the bond that had saved it. The countryside rushed by in a blur of green fields, scattered cottages, and winding rivers as the Hogwarts Express carried its passengers toward London. Inside their compartment, Hermione, Helene, and Rosier sat in companionable silence, each lost in thought. For the first time in years, they weren't planning the next battle or preparing for the next danger. The war beneath Hogwarts was over, but their story was far from finished. Rosier was the first to break the quiet. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. So really, what's next? We're free. No more exams. No more curfews. No more Death Eaters or ancient shadows under our feet. What do we do with that? Hermione glanced at Helene, who met her gaze with that familiar gleam of mischief and determination. It was as if they both knew the answer without needing to say it. Still, Hermione spoke, her voice steady. We look for what's broken, and we help fix it. Hogwarts wasn't the only place in the world that's been scarred by old magic and old mistakes. Helene nodded. We've seen how dangerous it is when magic is left untended, when people are too afraid to face the past. There have to be other places like that, other hungers waiting to rise. Rosier smirked, leaning back. And here I thought you'd both want a bit of rest first. Hermione actually laughed, a warm, genuine sound that filled the compartment. We'll rest. A little. But you're coming with us, aren't you? He grinned, tipping an imaginary hat. Couldn't let you get yourselves killed without me. By the time the train reached King's Cross, the trio had a plan, or at least the start of one. They would travel, learn, seek out the hidden corners of the magical world where history's wounds still festered. Not as Aurors, not as ministry agents, but as themselves, two sisters and the friend who'd chosen to stand with them when it mattered most. Their families waited on the platform. Hermione and Helene shared tight hugs with their parents, who were both overwhelmed with pride and relief. Rosier's father stood stiffly at a distance, but when Rosier approached him, there was the briefest nod, an unspoken truce between father and son. The farewell was short. None of them wanted to linger, to let the weight of the past hold them back. Within days, Hermione and Helene had packed what little they needed, their wands, their notes, and the lessons of Hogwarts. Rosier met them at the Leaky Cauldron, a bag slung over his shoulder, ready. Their first destination was an ancient forest in Eastern Europe, where magic had once been twisted by war. From there, they planned to visit the ruins of a fortress in the Alps, rumored to be cursed by a long-dead sorcerer's final spell. Whispers of forgotten magics and dangerous relics beckoned from across the world. And so they set out, not as students, not as warriors, but as seekers. The world was wide. The work was endless. But they faced it together. And somewhere far behind them, Hogwarts stood strong, whole at last, watching over them as they stepped into the unknown. The trio's journey began under a sky streaked with twilight, their boots crunching along an overgrown path as they entered the forest of forgotten names. Nestled deep within the Carpathian Mountains, this place was a patch of ancient wilderness avoided by even the most daring of wizards. No maps marked its heart, and no traveler who entered it without purpose returned unchanged. Hermione led the way, consulting a scrap of parchment covered in faintly glowing runes. The path had revealed itself to her in the margins of an old journal she'd discovered in the Hogwarts library's restricted section. The journal's author, a nameless witch from the age of the Founders, had written of a place where magic itself had turned silent, a forest where spells cast no echoes. It feels wrong here, Rosier muttered, his usual confidence muted. His wand was out, though the forest seemed to swallow its light. Like the world's holding its breath. Helene scanned the dense canopy above. Good. That means we're getting close to what we're looking for. The deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. The trees grew massive, their bark blackened and scarred by old magic. The air grew colder, and sound itself seemed to fade. No birdsong, no rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth, only the soft tread of their feet and the occasional creak of ancient wood. At last, they reached a clearing where no grass grew, only bare earth ringed by twisted roots. In its center stood a stone monolith, cracked and weathered, marked with runes no one had read in 1,000 years. Hermione stepped forward, heart pounding. She felt it, that same hum of ancient power she'd known in the Chamber of the Origin. But here, the magic was fractured, wounded, as if something had tried to bind it once and failed. Helene joined her, running her fingers along the stone's rough surface. It's like the hunger all over again. Another wound left to fester. Rosier kept watch, his eyes scanning the shadows beyond the clearing. Let's not wait for whatever lives here to notice us. Hermione raised her wand, speaking softly. "We're not here to bind. We're here to heal, as we did before." The monolith answered, not with light or sound, but with a sudden rush of memory. Images filled their minds. Battles fought here long ago, spells cast in desperation, a terrible curse unleashed that poisoned the land itself. The forest had once been a refuge, a sacred place of balance, until human fear and greed twisted its magic, leaving it broken. Rosier staggered, gripping the hilt of his wand. "We can't leave it like this. We have to finish what they started." Hermione's voice was firm. Together, like before. Helene's wand joined theirs. "Let's show this forest what unity can do." They began the spell, not to chain the broken magic, but to restore it. Hermione's charms wove patterns of mending and renewal. Helene's magic lent strength and resilience. Rosier's magic, subtle and clever, guided the spell through the fracture without tearing it wider. The runes on the monolith flared to life, the stone itself seeming to breathe as its magic awoke. The earth trembled, the trees shuddered, and then, at last, the air grew warm again. The clearing filled with light as the forest's ancient magic flowed whole once more. A breeze stirred the branches, and for the first time in centuries, the forest of forgotten names spoke. Not in words, but in the language of life renewed. When it was done, the three stood in silence, the weight of their task settling over them. The forest had been healed. But many such places awaited. Helene glanced at her sister, a smile breaking across her face. "One down." Hermione grinned back. "And a world to go." Rosier smirked, already turning toward the next path. "Better keep up, Grangers. The adventure's just starting." And with the forest at their backs, they set off again, toward the next mystery, the next mending, the next chapter of a story that was theirs to write. Their boots were still dusted with the soil of the healed forest when they arrived at their next destination, a fortress crumbling atop a wind-battered peak in the Austrian Alps. The journey had been long and the climb treacherous, but the trio had been drawn here by an old letter Hermione unearthed in the archives of the Ministry. A letter penned by a witch who'd once served as guardian of this place, warning of a curse never lifted. The locals called it Die Flusterfest, the Whispering Fortress. From the moment they crossed its outer wall, the name made sense. The air was filled with faint voices, too soft to make out, as if the very stones were trying to speak but couldn't quite form the words. Rosier ran a hand along a broken archway, the stone cold beneath his fingers. "This place feels like a graveyard. What happened here?" Hermione consulted the letter, her brow furrowed. It was a sanctuary during one of the old wizard wars, but something went wrong. A betrayal, maybe. No one knows. The magic here turned inward, trapping the fortress in its own memories. Helene studied the structure. The walls were thick, the windows narrow slits, designed to keep danger out. But now the fortress was its own prisoner. So it's not just cursed. It's haunted by itself. Inside, the fortress was a maze of fallen stones and dark corridors. The whispers grew louder, not angry or sorrowful, but pleading, as if begging to be heard. The trio followed the sound, their wands lighting the way, until they reached what must have once been the Great Hall. There, beneath a cracked banner of some forgotten house, stood a massive iron mirror framed in runes. Hermione felt the magic at once, deep, tangled, and desperate. This is the source. They tried to trap the curse here. But instead they trapped the fortress soul. Rosier grimaced. Who builds things like this? It's like they wanted their mistakes to outlive them. Helene approached the mirror, gazing into its dark surface. But it didn't reflect her. Instead, it showed flickers of the past. Wizards and witches arguing, casting spells, falling one by one as the curse took hold. They died trying to stop it, and bound their voices here forever. Hermione raised her wand. Then we free them. We free this place. Together, they began the work. The spell was delicate, more delicate even than healing the forest had been. They had to untangle memory from magic, pain from protection. Hermione whispered charms of release and peace. Helene's magic severed the twisted strands of the binding without letting them snap back in fury. Rosier's clever enchantments guided the spell like a key in a lock. The mirror cracked, not shattered, but split gently down the middle, the runes along its frame fading to nothing. The voices fell silent. The fortress seemed to sigh, the air warming as if the mountain itself felt lighter. They stood in the quiet, the work done, the curse lifted. For the first time in centuries, the whispering fortress knew peace. Rosier clapped dust from his hands. 2 down. Helene smirked. You're counting now? Hermione looked out through a broken window at the rising sun. Everywhere we go, we find magic broken by fear or hatred or pride. And everywhere we go, we'll heal it. Rosier grinned. Good. I hate being bored. With the wind at their backs and a new path ahead, the trio left the fortress behind, another scar mended, another story rewritten. Their next journey took them far from the cold stone of mountain fortresses and the green hush of forests. They crossed seas and followed old maps into the deserts of North Africa, seeking the ruins of Sarander, a lost magical city whispered of in ancient texts but absent from modern records. According to legend, Sarander had been swallowed by the sands after its wizards tried to bind the desert's spirit to their will, only to bring ruin upon themselves. The desert stretched endless and golden beneath the fierce sun, the heat shimmering in waves across the horizon. Hermione, Helene, and Rosier rode enchanted camels, charmed to need no rest or water as they carried them across the dunes. The air buzzed with magic, not wild but restless, as if the sands themselves waited for something. Rosier tugged his scarf tighter against the wind. Are we sure this place even exists? We've been riding for hours. Helene pointed ahead, her green eyes sharp. There. Look at how the dunes shift, like something underneath is trying to breathe. And indeed, as they crested a rise, the sands below rippled unnaturally. The desert floor fell away, revealing the outline of walls and towers half buried beneath the dunes. A single spire still stood above the sand, etched with runes so old the wind had nearly erased them. Hermione felt a thrill of discovery. We found it. Sarander. They dismounted and approached the ruin on foot. The magic here was strong but fractured, a familiar pattern. This was another place where ambition had turned to destruction. The sand hissed softly as if whispering secrets too long kept. At the base of the spire, they uncovered a great stone disc, carved with symbols of both summoning and imprisonment. The binding spell the ancient wizards had cast still clung to the city, fraying at the edges but not fully broken. It's like they tried to chain the desert itself, Hermione murmured. And instead they chained their city. And themselves. Helene knelt, brushing sand from the runes. If this binding fails completely, the magic of the desert could lash out. Storms, droughts, worse. We have to release it carefully. Rosier eyed the horizon, where storm clouds brewed despite the clear sky above. No pressure then. Together they worked. The spell to unbind was slow, careful. Hermione wove charms of release, her voice steady despite the rising wind. Helene focused on guiding the magic outward, back to the desert that had waited so long. Rosier's clever work stabilized the fragile edges of the spell, ensuring nothing tore where it shouldn't. The storm broke as they neared the spell's end, not of rain, but of wind and sand, swirling around them, testing their will. But they stood firm, their wands raised, their magic united. The binding spell cracked, then dissolved, the great stone disc sinking gently into the sand as the desert spirit was freed. The wind died. The storm clouds scattered. The sands of Sarander lay peaceful once more, the ruin at last at rest. Hermione shaded her eyes, gazing out at the endless dunes. 3 broken magics. 3 places mended. How many more do you think are out there? Rosier gave a tired grin. Enough to keep us busy for a lifetime. Helene smirked, brushing sand from her robes. Then we'd better get moving. With the desert quiet behind them, they mounted their camels once more, setting off toward the next mystery, wherever magic waited to be healed. Their journey took them next to the heart of Scandinavia, where legends spoke of a lake hidden deep within enchanted woods, its waters black as ink and its surface scattered with lights like stars. The Lake of Silent Stars, the locals called it, a place said to reflect the night sky even at noon, a place of beauty and sorrow in equal measure. Few dared approach it, for it was whispered that long ago, witches and wizards had sealed their grief within the lake after a great tragedy. But grief, like magic, could not be bound forever. Hermione, Helene, and Rosier followed a narrow path through the ancient pine forest, the air cold and filled with the scent of pine and moss. Snow dusted the ground, though no flakes fell from the clear sky above. The quiet here was absolute. No birds, no breeze, only the sound of their footsteps on the frozen earth. Rosier glanced around uneasily. We're getting good at finding the world's loneliest places. Helene smirked, though her eyes were wary. Lonely places are where broken magic hides, and where it waits for someone to set it right. At last, they stepped out of the trees and beheld the lake. It was as the legends said, its surface black and perfectly still, mirroring a night sky filled with stars, though the sun hung high above. The water seemed endless, the lights upon it shifting gently, as if moved by a current too deep to see. Hermione felt the magic at once, heavy and sorrowful, pressing against her heart. It's not dangerous, not in the way the hunger was. But it's wounded. The grief sealed here is still alive. Rosier peered across the water. And if the seal weakens too far? Helene answered, her voice quiet. That grief could flood this place. Maybe beyond. And grief turned loose like that, it can become rage. They approached the water's edge. The magic responded, the lights on the lake drawing inward toward them, as if the lake recognized that help had come at last. The trio stood together, wands at the ready, hearts steady. We don't break the seal, Hermione said. We ease it. Let the grief pass on. Let it rest. The spell they wove was soft, almost like song. Hermione's charm spoke of release and remembrance. Helene's magic steadied the lake's ancient sorrow, shaping it so it wouldn't lash out as it left. Rosier's clever workings helped guide the spell across the water's surface, touching each of those star-like lights in turn. The lake responded, ripples spreading outward, the black surface lightening shade by shade until it reflected the true sky above, pale blue, with the faintest hint of sunlit clouds. The stars upon its surface faded gently, like embers cooling after a long night. The air warmed. The silence lifted, broken by the soft stir of wind through the trees and the distant call of a bird. Hermione exhaled, relief filling her. It's done. The lake is free. Rosier gave a tired grin. You know, I wouldn't mind if the next place we find had a pub attached. Helene laughed. Come on, Rosier. You'd be bored in a week. They turned from the lake, its waters now at peace, and began the trek back through the forest. Another scar healed. Another place made whole. And ahead of them, countless more, waiting for their courage, their skill, and their bond. From the quiet forests of the north, their path led them far south to a place few believed truly existed. Aegiros, the drowned city said to lie beneath the waves off the coast of Greece. Ancient magical texts spoke of it, a city of wizards and scholars that sank beneath the sea in a single night, its fall blamed on forbidden experiments with time and tide. The sea claimed it, but the magic of the city endured, tangled in currents and storms, disturbing the waters to this day. Hermione, Helene, and Rosier stood aboard a small enchanted skiff, its hull charmed to glide silently across the restless surface. The sea glimmered beneath the setting sun, but the water around them was dark and deep, and the air smelled of salt and secrets. Rosier adjusted his grip on the tiller charm, eyeing the water. We're floating over a time bomb, aren't we? Hermione nodded, watching the horizon where storm clouds gathered despite the calm evening. The magic down there is broken, confused, maybe caught between moments. And the longer it churns like that, the worse the storms will get. They could spread beyond these waters. Helene peered into the depths, where glints of light flickered far below. We're not leaving until we set it right. With a whispered incantation, Hermione activated the submersion spell, and the skiff descended beneath the waves, the water parting gently around them in a shimmering bubble of air. Down they went, through layers of light and shadow, until the city revealed itself. Towers of marble and coral intertwined, statues half buried in sand, mosaics still gleaming faintly on crumbled streets. Aegiros, beautiful and broken, frozen in the moment of its fall. Magic hummed in the water, wild and disjointed. The trio could feel it, time magic, stuttering and looping like a record caught on a scratch. Helene pointed to the city's heart, where a great orrery of silver and gold floated weightless above a plaza. Its spheres spun wildly, out of rhythm, threads of raw magic snapping and reforming as the device struggled to complete whatever spell had doomed the city. That's the source, Helene said. They tried to control time itself. And they trapped their city between seconds, Hermione finished, her voice filled with both awe and sorrow. Together they swam closer, spells ready. Their task was delicate beyond measure. They had to unwind the tangled time magic without tearing the city apart or unleashing it upon the sea. Hermione spoke charms of stabilizing and slowing, her magic soothing the wild spin of the orrery. Helene's magic worked with hers, disentangling the threads of broken time from the city's natural magic. Rosier, steady as ever, found the spell's anchors and dissolved them one by one, freeing Egiros from its endless loop. The aura slowed, its spheres coming to a gentle halt. The hum of magic softened, the tangled threads dissolving like mist. Around them, the city seemed to sigh, its long nightmare at an end. As the trio rose toward the surface, the storm clouds above began to break apart, and the sea calmed. The city remained below, silent and at peace, no longer a wound in the world's magic. Breaking the surface, Rosier grinned, salt spray on his face. "That's 4. Where to next?" Hermione smiled, the sea breeze cool against her skin. "Wherever magic needs mending." Helene's eyes sparkled. "And we won't stop until it's done." Together, they turned their skiff toward the horizon, toward the next scar, the next mystery, the next adventure. Their travels led them inland once more, this time to the heart of an ancient valley in northern India. There, hidden behind mountains and protected by enchantments so old they blurred the senses, stood Vidara, the library that remembers. Long forgotten by the modern magical world, Vidara was said to house the collective wisdom of 1,000 generations, and the sorrows that came with it. What drew Hermione, Helene, and Rosier wasn't just the promise of lost knowledge. It was the reports, whispered by magical scholars and traders, that the library's magic had turned restless. Scrolls burned themselves to ash without flame. Books wept ink that stained the stone floors. The library's own memories, stored too long, had begun to bleed into the world beyond. They arrived at dawn, standing before the crumbling archway that marked Vidara's entrance. Vines crept across the stone, and the wards that once shone bright as the sun flickered faintly, like dying embers. Hermione gazed at the entrance, heart heavy. It was meant to safeguard wisdom, but it's drowning in its own grief. Helene touched the stone, feeling the pulse of magic within. Every sorrow ever written here, it's still alive. The library remembers too well. Rosier looked uneasy, adjusting his wand in its holster. And if it spills out completely? The pain of centuries could flood this valley, Hermione said quietly. And beyond. Inside, the library was vast beyond reason. Shelves soared into shadow, endless rows of scrolls, codices, and tomes. But the air was thick with sorrow, a pressure that filled their lungs, 1,000 voices of loss, failure, regret. The magic here had twisted under its own weight, no longer preserving wisdom but hoarding anguish. They moved carefully through the aisles, following the source of the disturbance. At the library's heart stood a great fountain, dry now, its basin carved with runes of memory and forgetting. Here the magic was strongest, the air trembling with power barely held in check. Helene studied the fountain's rim. This is where they bound the library's soul. It was supposed to filter the sorrow, not trap it. Rosier frowned. We can't just break the spell. That would release everything at once. Hermione nodded, her mind racing. We need to help it let go. Piece by piece. Memory by memory. Together, they began their work. Hermione's charms wove threads of gentle release, urging the library to surrender its burdens without destroying itself. Helene's magic untangled the most knotted, dangerous strands, the memories of great wars, of betrayals, of tragedies that had scarred generations. Rosier's enchantments strengthened the fountain's core, reshaping the binding into something that could breathe and flow. The magic responded. The air grew clearer. The sorrow eased, flowing into the fountain in soft silver streams, where it dissolved into nothingness. The shelves stood quiet at last, their contents no longer bleeding ink or flame. The library, at last, remembered wisely, holding knowledge but not pain. Outside, the valley brightened as if the sun itself welcomed the healing. Rosier exhaled. 5. We're getting good at this. Helene grinned, wiping dust from her hands. And we're not done yet. Hermione gazed at the horizon beyond the mountains. No, not yet. The world's still waiting. And so they left Vidara behind, whole, at peace, and set out once more toward the next broken magic that needed their strength. Their next destination took them far west, across seas and through ancient cities, until they reached the mist-shrouded coasts of Portugal. There, hidden among cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, lay the Garden of Kaliggo, once a place of beauty and healing, now a ruin where no plant bloomed, and the air itself seemed choked with despair. According to legend, Kaliggo had been created by a great healer who sought to grow plants that could cure any ailment. But when greed and envy led to betrayal, the garden's magic turned inward, poisoning itself and all who entered. Hermione, Helene, and Rosier stood at the iron gate, rusted and tangled with thorn vines. Beyond, the garden stretched in eerie silence. Paths of cracked marble, fountains dry as bone, and flower beds filled only with ash-gray soil. A heavy mist coiled through the air, thick with magic gone wrong. Rosier eyed the gloom warily. "Tell me we're not here to plant flowers." Helene smirked despite the weight of the place. "Not unless you brought seeds." Hermione stepped forward, hand resting on the gate. She felt the garden's magic, bitter, tangled, but still alive beneath the sorrow. "It doesn't need flowers. It needs forgiveness. The magic here is trapped in regret. It's been punishing itself for centuries." The three passed through the gate, their wands lit against the clinging mist. As they moved deeper, the garden's magic pressed in on them, filling their minds with echoes of the healer's dream, the betrayal that shattered it, and the long, lonely centuries of decay that followed. The garden seemed to weep, its very soil heavy with guilt. At the garden's center stood the ruined greenhouse, its glass shattered, its iron frame twisted. Within, a single tree remained, leafless, blackened by time, but still standing. Hermione knew at once. This was the heart of Kaliggo's magic, the tree where the healer had once bound his hopes. "We can't tear it down," she said softly. "We have to help it let go." Helene's voice was steady. Together, then, they raised their wands, weaving a spell of release, not to erase the garden's memory, but to free it from endless self-punishment. Hermione's magic soothed the garden's sorrow, reminding it of its purpose. Helene's untangled the threads of bitterness and loss. Rosier's clever charms mended what could be mended. The fountain's cracked rim, the shattered greenhouse frame, the broken stones of the path. The garden responded. The mist thinned. The soil darkened to rich earth. And from the blackened tree, the first green shoot in centuries unfurled, reaching toward the sky. The curse was broken. Rosier let out a long breath, a tired smile on his face. 6. You'd think magic would learn not to tie itself in knots. Helene grinned. "It's why we're here, isn't it?" Hermione watched as the garden stirred in the breeze, the air sweet at last. One place at a time, until they're all healed. And so they left Kaliggo behind, no longer a garden of sorrow but one of hope, and turned again toward the horizon, where more broken magics waited for their courage. Their travels brought them at last to the edge of the world, or so it felt. In the windswept highlands of Scotland, far beyond any maps marked paths, they found the place spoken of only in fragments of legend, the Shattered Circle. Here, long ago, a coven of the greatest magical minds had gathered to weave a spell meant to unite wizard kind across the world. But ambition, mistrust, and fear had turned their grand work to ruin. The spell had broken, and with it the land itself. Now, the circle stood in ruins, and the magic that once promised unity had become a storm of chaos, scarring everything it touched. The trio stood on a lonely rise, the wind sharp and cold. Before them stretched the circle, standing stones cracked and broken, arranged in a spiral that had long since been torn apart. The ground between them was scorched in some places, frozen in others, the very air flickering with wild, untamed magic. Hermione's heart ached as she took it in. They wanted to bring the magical world together. Instead, they tore it apart. Helene's eyes were hard, determined. "Then it's fitting we're here. The world can be whole. We've seen it. We've made it so." Rosier studied the swirling magic between the stones, sparks of light and shadow clashing in midair, threads of spells that had fought each other for centuries. "And if we fail, this storm could tear half the country apart." Hermione stepped forward, wand in hand. "We won't fail. Not here. Not now." Together they entered the circle. The magic howled around them, a storm of broken intent, unfinished work, and ancient hurt. It tried to drive them apart, as it had driven apart those who created it. But the bond between the twins and between them and Rosier held firm. They began their final great work. Hermione's magic reached for the broken threads of the original spell, finding what good intent remained. Helene's power steadied the circle itself, binding stone and land and air together, so the storm could not break them. Rosier's quick, clever spells guided the chaotic energies, unwinding the knots, coaxing them into harmony rather than destruction. It was the hardest task they had ever faced. The storm fought them at every turn, testing their strength, their resolve, their trust. But together they stood. Together they endured. At last the wild magic calmed. The air grew still. The stones of the circle glowed softly with a light both gold and silver. The echo of a unity that had almost been lost, but now lived again. Hermione's wand lowered, her shoulders trembling with exhaustion. "It's done." Helene turned to her, her green eyes bright. "We made the world a little less broken." Rosier gave a weary grin. 7. Lucky number. They stood together in the dawn that broke over the highlands, the circle whole again, the magic at peace. And in that quiet, they knew their journey was almost at its end. But the work they'd begun would never truly be finished. There would always be more places to mend, more wounds to heal. But now the world was stronger, and so were they. The sun rose slowly over the restored shattered circle, its rays casting long shadows across the ancient stones, now whole once more. Hermione, Helene, and Rosier stood together at the heart of the circle, the wind carrying with it a new stillness, not emptiness, but peace. For the first time in generations, the land felt healed. The storm of broken magic that had raged for centuries was gone, replaced by quiet strength. Hermione gazed out over the highlands, her chest rising with a deep, steady breath. "We did it. The last great wound we came to mend." Helene, standing at her side, wiped a smudge of soot from her cheek and gave a crooked grin. "I wouldn't say last. The world's full of broken things. But this was the one that mattered most." Rosier leaned against one of the stones, his wand at his side, exhaustion and satisfaction mingling in his eyes. "So what now? You two finally take that holiday? Or do we go looking for the next forgotten curse?" The sisters exchanged a glance, the kind of wordless exchange only they could share, born of a lifetime of standing together through joy and fury, hope and sorrow. Hermione spoke first. "There'll always be more work. But maybe it's time to teach others to do what we've done. To heal magic, not just wield it." Helene nodded slowly, her gaze thoughtful. "To pass on what we've learned. So no one needs to repeat the mistakes that left these scars." Rosier smirked. "I suppose I'll have to be your assistant professor, then. Someone's got to keep your students from blowing themselves up." They laughed, the sound echoing across the highlands like a promise. The trio made their way down from the circle, their boots crunching on the frost-kissed grass. As they walked, they spoke of what came next, a school perhaps not like Hogwarts, but one dedicated to magical healing, to the art of mending what others had broken. A place where magic's greatest strength, its power to unite and restore, could be taught to those willing to listen. They traveled to magical communities across the world, sharing their knowledge, guiding others in the art of repairing old wounds. The garden at Kaliggo bloomed again. The library of Vidara opened its doors to new scholars. The forest of forgotten names flourished, no longer silent but filled with life. Their names became known not as heroes of war, but as healers of magic. The twins who had shown that Gryffindor and Slytherin could stand side by side, not divided by history, but united by purpose. And Rosier, ever loyal, ever quick-witted, stood with them through it all, a reminder that friendship forged in battle endures beyond it. And when at last they returned to Hogwarts, older, wiser, and at peace, the castle welcomed them home. The towers seemed taller, the stones warmer beneath their feet. For Hogwarts remembered its daughters well, and the legacy they had left upon the world. In the quiet of the great hall, as evening fell and the stars shone through the enchanted ceiling, Hermione, Helene, and Rosier sat together once more, no longer seeking the next broken thing to fix. For now, they had earned their rest, and the knowledge that the world was stronger for all they had done. The end, but not truly an end. For magic lives, and so does hope. And wherever magic calls, there will always be those who answer.